Hey everybody, welcome back to the Global GEULA Summit. We have three amazing co-hosts here for this special event. As you know, I'm sure, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, Rav Doniel Katz, the amazing Shimona Tzukernik, who is on a trip and yet showed up just to be with us, and myself. The purpose of this, let's say, 2-hour session is to give you guys a chance to ask questions that maybe you didn't get to ask before, or that we didn't get to relay to the speakers. We have a panel, and a panel is always fun. Well, this panel will be fun. So we'll have different perspectives. You know, one of the things that many of us noticed throughout the summit is that each person who came on had a completely unique perspective on the same topic. Like, there was literally no repeat that I was aware of. So it will be I think it could be very interesting and dynamic to have different perspectives in the same space, but how deep we go and how real your questions are, that's up to you guys. Okay, so I just want to turn over the floor to whoever wants to say hi and open with something, and I'm going to just figure out how to check for questions live. Let's start that. Say hi, somebody. Shimona.
Hi, everyone. Shimona, so nice to be with you all, and I'm honored to be on with Rabbi Simon, who taught me years ago and still continues to teach me, and Rav Doniel Katz. So shall I share a little thought?
Sure.
To begin with about. So I saw a post recently on Facebook. I don't go on that much anymore, but I saw a post, and a friend of mine was speaking about marriage isn't this and this and this, like all these glowing references, but it's this and this and this, you know, the drudgery and the grind and the daily thing. And if you like this, share. And you know, what struck me is how difficult it is to be authentic. I felt like what I see when I go online is fake, authentic truth, which is like, we're tired of just pretending to be redeemed. And so we speak about our struggle as if it is authentic. But I think that the way we frame things can really take us right into exile or out. Language is like camouflage. You know, that when Esau went hunting, we're told there was tzayid bepiv, venison in his mouth. That's one way of reading it, but Rashi says he was also kind of stealing with his words. He was deceiving. And so that's what's on my mind today, that even speech about redemption and being authentic can steal who we are from under us.
What's an example of like the kind of words that you see? Not an example of whose post and where can we see it, but the kind of words that you see which are being what I like to refer to as inauthentically authentic. But
yeah, it's like fake authenticity. Right. Well, I'll give you an example. And you know, I'm not quite sure of what it means to actually get out of that. It's very complex because on the one hand, if you just succumb to the exile and you describe it in those terms, like I'm in hell and, you know, can't wait to get out, well, then in some way you're spinning your wheels and getting deeper into the ice. But if you speak about it, this would be an example. I see people do it a lot. I mean, just being in the profession of coaching. So, you know, you have a glimpse of what's behind the curtain or behind the mask. And then someone will say, well, this was me at 10, and this was me at 20, and this was me at 30. And then I went through like the terrible 40s or the 50s or whatever it is. And they're speaking about it as if there's so much bravery there. Like, I prevailed and I went through, but they're not ever really telling you what's going on. Like when you know the people, you know that that's not the truth.
Right.
It's like, I am presenting myself as a liberated, authentic person, but that very framing is hiding something.
People don't usually tell their truth. They tell their story about what happened. I also know when people come and you sit one-on-one, they're asking a rabbi, you know, a question, and they'll present whatever they say about their marriage, exactly what you said, whatever they say about their journey. They're not starting from the vulnerable place. It's our job to kind of facilitate that they move into that place, because GEULA only happens when you authentically turn the darkness to light. But what people usually, their first layer that you have to move through is the story that they've told themselves about their marriage, the story they've told themselves about being their victimhood or their incredible success at overcoming odds. Mm-hmm. But it's still a narrative, and it's still a cover over. And I kind of feel like, on the subject of GEULA, this is one of the things that prevents GEULA, and sometimes, unfortunately, even with our own selves and our own frum brothers and sisters, is that we can speak a language of GEULA, we could speak a language of Mashiach, but it itself is a philosophy we're pushing out, rather than a philosophy that we're turning in and seeing within ourselves where the blocks are. And that it's there's a global change that will happen on a messianic level. But I think anyone that facilitates and does the inner work and reads really what the focus of Hasidus was, which was to turn that within, to make a global movement, but to turn that within and just find the divinity within every thought that comes to you, as the Baal Shem Tov would say, when in everything in the world. It's easier to see things out there. It's harder to see even our own internal darkness, that light. And a person has to have enough das, sometimes enough feeling of their own internal light to be able to confront their own internal darkness. I think many people don't have that. And therefore they don't have the capacity to go deep. And that's part of the challenge. I think that's one of the glass ceilings on GEULA right now, is because we don't yet have the skill set, the capacity, and a strong enough sense of real light to really confront our real darkness. So that's part of the challenge, I think.
Is that what you mean, Shimona? Are you talking about people who come to you for help? Are you talking about someone like yourself?
In general, I think Rabbi Katz is on point. I went to a writing workshop a couple of years back, and the woman was speaking about this alchemical process of transformation. But, when you know the lingo, it's easy to play the part. You can play a villain and you can play the guru. You can play redemption. And that, in some way, I think is more constraining and limiting. Like, Rav Mendel Futterfass, the great chassid, he said, when you stain denim, it's not such a big deal. When you stain silk, it is. Like, I think that there's just this kind of elitism, not just in terms of professions, but consciousness. And somewhere the proletariat and the simple people are doing better. They're exceeding because there's a simplicity. They're not getting caught, like Rabbi Katz is speaking about. That is what I was talking about, the sophistication around the discourse of redemption and how difficult it is. It may not be PC, but I remember when I was in high school, I had a French teacher who was engaged to a Buddhist. Amazing guy, his name is Mike Dickman. And they gave me a book, and in the book, there was a story about a monkey who was in a cage, and every time he tried to get out the cage, it's a Buddhist story, there was another cage, and then he became more hysterical. So there was another cage, and he became more hysterical, another cage, until he gave up, and then everything dissolved. It's like, well, we want to get out, and we want to get out, and we want to get out. And in some way, the way we're framing our process traps us, I think. And the blue collar, simple guy, the wood choppers and the water carriers, they're doing a good job. I think they're doing a better job but maybe not,
There's an idea, I'm sure all you sophisticated spiritual teachers have heard this secular idea called spiritual bypassing. I'm sure, have you read about that, Rav Doniel Katz? Are you familiar with this? No. Everyone can go Google this, only after, obviously, our wonderful session is finished. It's a really important teaching. I think there's different ways to explain it. But I think it's another form of what you're tuning into here, which is this idea that, some people, you see it very much in the New Age movement. I'm not saying you don't see it in our own world. In our world, it's called like Baruch Hashem, Chesed Hashem, Hodel Hashem, Ki Tov. But on the inside, you see that person's upset and angry and depressed, but there's a kind of line that they've learned to use. In the secular kind of new age world, it's like everything is light and everything is love. I've lost my job, but this is an incredible window to opportunities. But on the inside, there's, pain and anxiety. So they're kind of taking a bypass to sound and present themselves with a spiritual language. But without doing the deep internal work, without doing, and to move beyond sounding externality of spirituality, of Ruchnius, into true internal transformation, you actually have to confront the dragon. You have to confront the darkness. Otherwise, there's no tikkun being done, and we never move closer.
Well, if I could just say something, and I feel like, Simon, you probably understand this concept. I'm sure you do better than I do, because you introduced me to it. But years ago, Simon introduced me to a teaching of the Rebbe where he basically says that you can live your life like a warrior, like a sportsman, or like an actor. And my first take on that is, well, let's be the warrior, warriors of God, let's go out, even if the weapons are weapons of light. But the Rebbe says in that teaching about Tumas Madras, it's a certain kind of impurity that when you're the warrior, darkness is very real. So it's life and death. And then when you're the sportsman, it's about winning or losing, which is very different from life and death. The stakes are not as high. And then he says the highest way to serve God is as an actor. And I was fascinated by that because I had been involved in drama and directing, acting and directing, and that notion of assuming a false persona in order to access who you really are was just astonishing to me. And it seemed, counterintuitive to this notion of redemption, that redemption is about being authentic, and this was about assuming something. But
what is the process he's recommending in that context?
Well, Simon, maybe you'll explain it, but what I did understand there was that the actor understands that the darkness is a facade. So knowing that, as opposed to buying into a reality, is very, very different. And there's something liberating in that. And I think it applies to the point that we started with about speech, that it's camouflage, but it's also magic. Anyway, Simon, maybe you have... Maybe I misunderstood it.
Thanks for starting us with such a trivial thought.
Well, they still have to give their trivial thought. They're not going to.
Yeah, and we do have some questions too. So let's go, Simon.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Shifra, and thank you, co-panelists, Rabbi Katz, Shimona. It's always beautiful to intersect and cross-pollinate as souls do. With that as a segue, yes, it is a fascinating concept that Shimona brought up. I mean, essentially, to put it briefly, it would be like three different psychological modalities, if you wish, or psychological attitudes toward dealing with life and its challenges. And one is that you recognize and you consider the battles of life as very real, as equals to you. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And you're basically, life is difficult, which made The Road Less Traveled the biggest best-selling self-help book. It began, the first line was, life is difficult. Most people just read that line and that was it. Life is hard, and just face it. And you'll lose many, you'll win a few. That's one approach. That's like the warrior. The second approach is that you see yourself somewhat above the fray, and you're able to transcend, but you're still part of it. You're still, we call it a sportsman. You're playing the game. And sometimes you become, as we play the game, we become part of the game. And then there's the third attitude, which is really the actor. And that really, maybe the best archetype for that is Yaakov when he dresses up in the garments of Esav. What was the significance of that? I mean, there were so many other ways to get the blessings and so on, because there's the concept in Hasidic thought, which is that the one who's doing the refining has to dress up in the garments of where the refining is taking place. In the language, B'mavar is mislabish b'levushe hamizbarer. I'm just saying it in the original Hebrew. It's a beautiful concept, which means that if you're going to come to the United States of America and try to teach us spirituality or Torah and speak Hebrew or Aramaic, no one will know what you're talking about. You have to speak the language of the people. And therefore, you have to dress up in those garments. Now, on one hand, it could seem somewhat a little manipulative or even deceptive. But on the other hand, it's the same idea that when you teach children and you say, listen, if you come home from school with good marks, I'll give you a reward, candy, take you for a trip. Why don't you just tell them, learn truth because it's true? Why do we have to smear it with sugar and candy? Because for children, that's the language they understand as being sweet. And when they get a little older, they understand that that sweetness is really spiritual sweetness. So the whole idea of communication in this world, for the soul coming to this world, is not to defy existence, not asceticism, not to become a warrior, not to become a sportsman, but to basically act as if you're part of this world, but you're really coming to convey a message that's higher than this world. So it's really transcendence dressed up in the garments of engagement.
That's like the old line, to be in it, but not of it.
Exactly.
To be dealing with the present reality, but in your mind, you've transcended, that we don't completely transcend, that we're not engaged in it. We're engaged in it, but we're not buying into the illusion, the matrix, so to speak.
Yes.
I understand the
concept. But if I can push back on...
I want to just say one more line. And in an interesting way, you can reverse the duplicity that you spoke about, Shimona, the dissonance between being an honest and dishonest person, and you turn it into a holy type of duplicity by saying you're a soul. You're not a material being on a spiritual journey. You're a spiritual being on a material journey, on a physical journey, and you actually turn the duplicity into a positive by using the material objects to really be stepping stones to spiritual growth.
Shimona.
Go ahead, Shim.
You have something to say.
While Simon was speaking about the need to enclothe oneself, I mean, the soul is embodied. The body is like a garment, and then we enclothe ourselves in language and to be the actor. It's like, just putting on that mask and then taking it away. And like sometimes when you put on a mask, you go inside. But as you were speaking about putting on garments, I was thinking about that line in Tanya. I mean, the Rebbe speaks about it extensively at the beginning, but I was just recently learning chapter 9 with some people. He says you achieve a certain level of self-mastery al-yadei hasaros begodim atzoim, by removing the soiled garments. It's not just, I guess what I came to the session with was the sense of how challenging it is, even just talking about it. So then you get caught in whatever that was the line Rabbi Katz mentioned, or Simon speaking about the necessity for a holy kind of duplicity. And at the same time, there is the requirement of a lot of sweat, discipline, perseverance to remove the soiled garments. I mean, we're not naked, rarely.
I think that the process I always understand of Chassidus, from many different strom and just from my own personal avoda, my experience in the meditation. By the way, I'm also used to be an actor and a director, so I have a little track record in this industry. And I've always been fascinated as an idea, if I was ever get bored, to take the method acting approach and apply that as a form of musa. I always thought if a person had to enter into the essence of Avram Avinu and walk around, I always thought that could be seriously a very interesting mahalach to try. But I've always assumed, like, what the Tanya was saying there is the beginning. When we do seminars, retreats, and doing internal work with people, some people, as I was suggesting before, have so much darkness, they don't even have the das to have the self-awareness, the capacity for self-reflection to do the inner work. So the first stage is you have to take off those dirty clothes, those levushim, the the negative midas, the negative beliefs, the das, the tuma, and you have to go to a deeper place. The first place has to be transcendence, because you have to begin with some kind of awareness of you have an neshama, or you're greater than your history, you're greater than your yetzer hara. Otherwise, there's no you to work on yourself, and there's no you to transcend yourself. So it always seems to me when we do retreats, the first thing I try and do, I used to help people work through their blocks so that they could access the neshama, so they could access Dveikus. Then I realized the biggest chesed you can do to someone is take them, despite their blocks, just say, we're just going to leave that there, take them to Dveikus so they can experience their light, their expansiveness. And that's the first stage of removing, all the levushim, all the clothes, all the midas, all the fears and doubts and pains and taiva, gaiva, kinu, and kavod. And then from that place, that's the transcendence. Then I think you can become the actor. Then I think you are moved enough from your habit. You're moved enough from the nefesh Bahamas. You're moved enough from the struggles of your life, and you get a greater context in that awe, in that kedusha, in that das elyon, that sense of self. And then from that place of clarity, you can now enter into, and you have a chance to be an actor, because now you don't necessarily see yourself as always defined by that anger, or defined by that job, or defined by that yetzer hara. So and you can begin to kind of, the midah of hakna'a, of to push it down, or not necessarily respond to it. That's the basic level, to be Messiach Das. But I think after that, there's a fourth level, I think, is when you don't negate the Kli. Torah is not a path of negation, it's a path of elevation. You realize that, which I think is the ultimate actor state, that you can use anger as a tool in acting, and you can use walking as a tool in acting, and you can use everything that you have as a tool. That's the ultimate state of Chassidus, is once you've transcended, and then you can use that, the process of Hagna'ah, to not be controlled or defined by all your midas. Then what you can actually begin to do is choose when to use each one, like Pinchas may use anger, or like anyone could use anything, because you're not defined by it. It doesn't control you, you control it. And I think that's the point, when all your history and all your habits and all your nature of the Nefesh Bahamas is no longer their enemy. It is now a resource, like any actor can use. The history is a resource to tap into different emotions, which you could use in different ways. That for me is a kind of geula state. That's what I think big oivd and big spiritual masters are able to do. It's not just they have no emotions, they have passion emotions, but they're able to guide it without taking the illusion, the matrix of reality so seriously. The chazé de hai alma, so Nachman says, the illusion of the world, that they still use their tools to affect the world. I think that's what you seem to be suggesting the actor's role is. Well, that wraps up our 3-hour session.
Is it, Shimona, are you just, in the simplest sense, I think you said this in the simplest way, but are you not saying, it sounds like you're in two places at once, or looking at something from two perspectives, but it seems like you're saying that we should not lie about the fact that redeeming ourselves is hard and often painful, and that we have to be real. Is that part of what you're saying, or am I mishearing that?
No, I think that's it, that in our struggle to emerge from our own exiles, we want to be authentic, but then there is a verbal discourse around that can bury us again. I have personally, in my life, I think that it's been quite a puzzle. When I thought that I was making breakthroughs, I wasn't necessarily. Hindsight is 20/20. And look, I know that, the Talmud says, if someone tells you they tried and didn't succeed, don't believe them. And if they tell you they made no effort but succeeded nonetheless, don't believe them. And if they tell you they tried and they succeeded, believe them. Well, I was at a retreat one year, and there was a video of a woman who had been ill for most of her life, and she had passed away. So this video of her was showing posthumously, and in the video she's being interviewed, and she said, it'll be good in the end, and if it's not yet good, it's not yet the end. And it was so poignant, she wasn't there anymore. And her words rung so true that, we believe in God, and we believe in redemption, and it will be good in the end. But what light is, what goodness is elusive, and how to get there. If it was basically like making a cake or a mathematical formula, we would have been there a long time ago, So I just, like, I have worked on something for decades and suddenly realized, oh no, like what I thought I was doing, I wasn't doing. Then that's humbling. But maybe, like the Rebbe Marash says, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart, and then you can begin to be free. But like when the discourse around it being a failure and setting you free becomes the script, then you're binding yourself in exile.
Wait, that's the part I didn't understand. Can you explain what you mean when the discourse around it? I didn't get that. Just the last sentence.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm saying I worked on something for many years.
Got that part.
They say,
and I relate to it.
40 years, okay? And suddenly I realized I didn't succeed. Well, I don't know yet, because it's not, my life is still in process. And even when I die, my existence I'll still be in process. But then there is a way of framing that. And the frame is, I tried, but, maybe what God wants is my broken heart. And nothing as whole as a broken heart. And that may be true. That may be my first impulse. But when I have many layers and years of reading scripts and pouring through it and thinking in terms of exile and redemption, and I have all the lines and the slogans, well then if I put a band-aid of a slogan, there's nothing as whole as a broken heart, okay,
right, that's Gaulis, right? No,
just
forget
sit
that.
down and rot,
Yeah, now I understand.
It's not what you're supposed to say in that moment. There's nothing as whole as a broken heart.
I think we're supposed to end death. That's what I mean. Maybe my life brought me to that. Surely my life brought me to that place. And hearing the things that the Rebbe said, since we're being so honest here, I don't think anything short of death being removed from the world could be called GEULA, although we can have glimmers of light. And then, yes, for everybody who's listening also, it's the pattern to fall back into some awareness of darkness again, or feeling like you were flying and all of a sudden you're falling. It seems, but I think there are things that we could learn from Chassidus about. I'm sure that Simon also has something to say here and about these cycles.
I was about to say, as you said that word, I'd like to look at it as not fatalistic, but rather in a positive way, which means there are things we have control over, there are things we don't have control over. At this point, we don't have control of seizing death in the full sense of the word, but we have total control over stopping the little deaths that we are creating every moment of our lives. We are killing different parts of ourselves. We're killing different parts of each other. Now, that ultra sensitivity of a truly spiritual enlightened person is recognizing that, and using the language of Kabbalah, of the Arizal, that the great symptom, this great deep concealment is happening every second in our lives, every moment. Every time we're duplicitous, every time we're selfish, every time we're jealous, every time we're angry, it's all a form of a little death, a disconnect between you and your divine purpose, between you and God, which is why anger is compared to idolatry, and even things like Lashon Hara is compared to killing. Not just one person, 3 people. And I think that the word death, of course, we all know what it means in the worst possible sense of it, but there's the little deaths that we become completely desensitized to, that we're doing every moment to each other and even to ourselves when you betray yourself. When I hear Shimona speak, on one hand, my heart goes out to you, but at the same time, I know your strengths, I know your talents, I know what you have accomplished. So I say to myself, are you somewhat killing your own little dream by not saying I'm succumbing to the fact that it may not have worked out? I know you said the end, it'll be good.
Well, no, that wasn't what I was saying though, Simon.
Okay, no, good. No, I'm glad to hear that. I'm
very
just
complex process of how to dance. It's like martial arts.
Yeah, no, but I wasn't really meant to you. I was just using so many of people probably watching or listening to this. That's what happens. We resign ourselves. We surrender. And surrender is yet another little death. I would like to believe that, especially in this period of time, which is the 3 weeks, talking about GEULA, Gaulis. GEULA is life and death. It is life and death. Life in the sense of spiritual life. We know wicked people, even when they're alive, they're dead. And righteous people, even when they're biologically dead, they're alive. The question is, what are you doing? Are you busy dying or are you busy living? To paraphrase yet another cliche.
it feels to me that there's some more and more, I don't even know if I'll be able to articulate this clearly, but it feels more and more that rather than the scenario of GEULA coming and presenting itself to us, which in certain ways it is and is destined to do, but it seems like a big part of that, or even more than that, is our shifting our own consciousness till we perceive things in a different way. Like being, well, I guess Rav Doniel spoke to this, and so did you, or so did Simon, actually all of you did, being the actor, playing the role and not being the role. But that's not just a position. I mean, I hear that you're struggling with how to position your actual reality with destiny, right? With your potential and with destiny. That's kind of how I'm hearing you, Shimona. Like, how do we process the reality of life in the context of infinite potential that's unfolding now, and the things that we've learned about that, and what's possible for us that we think we're experiencing that maybe we aren't experiencing, and how do we frame all of that? What do we do with that? How real, do we go with it, or do we fight against it? But I feel like at the end of the day, the main, and I think everybody's saying this in your own words, but the main power that we have is to dig into our blindness till that we can see with new eyes, see more, be in more than one place at once. It doesn't seem like GEULA will unfold in a linear reality at first. It feels like it unfolds in different dimensions, in different ways that we can touch with our consciousness, so that sometimes we can bring in, like the quantum computers, the D-Wave computer. Some people are saying that the quantum computer, I heard a little class on it a few years ago, 17-minute class by somebody who manages the quantum computer for Google. And he basically said it just, it brings in usable information from other dimensions. What does that mean? But somehow I think that that we do have the potential to touch other dimensions, and then to bring that perspective into this more linear dimension and more. That's kind of that to me, and yeah, in that they're going to be, I think we have to honor our true emotions, and I think we have to be true and truthful with ourselves and also with others, primarily with ourselves. I think it's all real. I don't think it's either or. I think what we experience is the reality of how it needs to unfold. Obviously, we need to get better at it and deeper, and collaboration. I mean, I have to just share that it feels really, I just arranged this panel because it seemed like it would be cool for people, but this is really cool for me. Like, we should be having these discussions. Well, what potential in these discussions, Yeah, I'd love to just really do more of that. Anyway, if anybody else, there are a few questions now. So if anybody has anything else to say about this, we can come back to it, and I'll look and see what people are asking. Also, if somebody wants to call in live, we can try that. You press *2 if you have to be on the phone for that.
People asking questions through where? Through Facebook? Through where?
Through, well, David just sent me a couple through Skype, so I don't know where he got them. I have Instant Teleseminar. There's some people on the web. There's some people on the phone.
Let's hear some questions.
Just told me in 1 minute we'll be competing with, that was 30 minutes ago, with Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg's live broadcast. Okay.
You're competing with a lot more than that. Talking about all the media streaming going on that.
They closed down Facebook. It's just us and him. This is the GEULA moment. This is it.
Right. Well, then we have to be in more than one place at once, right?
These,
so come on,
should
you guys,
be the only options people have in the world. This is the biggest bechira that they have. Yes.
Okay, so I'll just look at what David sent me, because that's the easiest to start with. From Mia says, we know that there have been phases throughout history where well-meaning Jews have become delusional about GEULA. I would love for each of you to explain how we're not being delusional now.
Be delusional. Go for it. Should be the biggest fellow we have. Oh, there's a lot to say.
But we understand,
we have
the messianic movements have left a lot of people with a lot of trauma. It is an actual real thing. Okay, he's not going first. Who wants to go first? I see Simon smiling. You want to go first, Simon?
Whatever you feel. I'm very comfortable lying back here. I might feet up and just be very relaxed.
How do we know we're not delusional? About GEULA.
Look, I don't want to wax philosophical here about how we know we're not delusional. I don't know if you'll ever be able to prove we're not delusional, because there are philosophers that say all of existence is a delusion. And you can't disprove that, because part of the proof is also delusion. It's also part of the delusion, the matrix, as they say. So at the end of the day, look, in simple terms, it comes down to this. Do we believe that we are fundamentally good people and we have difficult challenges, or we're difficult people and have good moments? The Jewish concept is very straightforward. There's no such concept as original sin or as original evil. God, the good God, created the universe. It's a fundamentally good world, but he wanted it to be accomplished through a partnership with us and gave us free will. And we can make our mistakes, and we do make our mistakes. And we can easily give credence to darkness as much as to light. But the secret to the Jewish survival has always been one thing and one thing only. Light is more powerful than darkness, period. And we've seen it. You know, if we said this 4,000 years ago, you could say it was a theory, Abraham's theory. We have seen it in thousands of years of ultimate suffering, that unspeakable suffering, whether it was the Egyptian exile, whether it was the Babylonian, whether it was the Roman, whether it was the Holocaust. I mean, we are here standing for one reason only. We believe that light is stronger than darkness, and we believe that redemption will ultimately overcome the forms of exile or displacement or spiritual displacement or whatever one calls it. So if that one calls delusional, well, you know what? Then you're arguing 4,000 years of Jewish history. Our Jews, we're standing here when all these great empires are gone. So belief in Mashiach and GEULA is not some type of new concept that came up in the 20th, 21st century. It was embedded in history from the beginning of time. It was what made our hearts beat. It's what gave us hope. It what gave us confidence. And the most difficult times and the best of times, frankly, we would never lose sight of the destination of our journey. And the arrow only goes one direction, which means we can't go backwards. We can only get closer to this destination. So it's ridiculous in my mind, anyone that thinks about it in any intelligent way, to say, for especially coming from the Jewish history, to question such a statement. Now, I don't mind the word delusional, don't get me wrong. I'm just speaking very personally that I find it to be delusional if anybody thinks otherwise, that after what we've survived, and that today we live in comforts where we could sit here and talk across the world with technology about Torah and no one's going to arrest us, and we're not being rounded up and our children are not being gassed. Come on. I mean, and we're able to talk and have the luxury to even discuss whether it's delusional, you know? So I would find it a disgrace to our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who paid unbelievable prices for their beliefs. So to me, it's not even a question. Once I don't even have a doubt about that, about the fact that we will reach the destination, and that's the price we paid for thousands of years, and that's what made it worth it. That's my response. Go for it.
Rabbi Tzukernik, you next.
Certain, there are certain words that get you, like, are we delusional? Things like that.
No, but it's a good question, and I know you're not saying it's not. It's a great question, meaning like, how can we really? But this is what people really want to know. We really believe this? This is such good. I used to feel this way. I didn't always believe in God.
No, I honestly, I did not mean in any way to dismiss. It would be disparage the question at all. I know what's happening.
Is the person asking specific the general idea of Messiah being, or the Messianic era, a problematic issue, or the person was talking about a Shabtai Tzvi or certain delusional individuals in the person?
I think the nature of the question was, historically, there have been times in history like Shabtai Tzvi and probably others where so many people believed and followed and it just went bad. And how do we know that we're not? Like, I understand this. I understand the deep desire to feel that you can trust something. Like I used to feel that God was too good to be real. And it took me a long time to get over that. Is that, could I really believe there's a God? That would be too good to be true. So yes, please, Shimona. It's a great question, by the way. And I love your answers.
Rabbi Katz, you were going to say something?
No, that's basically that's it.
I just want to mention as an aside, it wasn't what I was going to say before, but as an aside, one of the things that I see that happens when people are seeking spirituality and redemption is there's a strong attachment to the tree of life and not as strong an attachment to the tree of knowledge. And the tree of knowledge is the legal dimension and of life, the mystical dimension. And I think that it's impossible to have the tree of life without the tree of knowledge. They don't go separately. And when you look at the movements where there was a mistake and where people were being misled, the best yardstick is that there was a deviance from halacha, from Jewish law. I mean, that wasn't what I was going to focus on, but just because of your comment, in the reference to Shabtai Tzvi, I think that is significant. That, I once saw, it's a Sukkos Mimer, I don't remember which one, but the Rebbe says, if you want to know if you're going in the right direction or not, look in the code of Jewish law. That's how you know. So if we look in the code, we are definitely going in the right direction. But I had wanted to share two other points, and just as a quick segue, Simon mentioned luxuries, and there's this fascinating statistic that most of us today live a more luxurious life than kings and queens of 200 years ago. Like, just have running water and toilets that flush. It's amazing. And then you get milk, you go to the fridge and you've got milk and you can have orange juice and, there's food, you're not dying of starvation. I mean, just those levels. And I think, when we speak about ma'adanim ka'afar, diamonds like dust, which they are, just a specific formulation of the dust, but people, we don't realize. It's like diamonds became like dust. I took people on safari to Africa, and it just broke people's heart. There were children, their stomachs were distended because they're starving and dying. You just don't have food. Begging there is very different than just begging because you don't want to work. I'm not saying everyone who begs is lazy, not at all, but I see that it's a very complex thing, and it's often connected to much larger social issues. But I'm saying we don't in the West appreciate that notion, and I think that diamonds have become like dust. But from my perspective, this may sound dogmatic, but I'll say it. Firstly, when you look at the history of the Jewish people, there have been millions and millions of people between us and the matriarchs and patriarchs, but in a direct line, they're very few. Between me and Sarah, there's probably 180 women, 190 women, something like that. Mother after mother, my mother and her mother and her mother.
I think even less than that. I think it's half that, by the way.
Well, the Rebbe is 175 from David HaMelech, who was 15 from Avraham Avinu. So okay. If you take 6 women in 100 years, that's 60 in 1,000 and 180 in 3,000. And it's probably not 6. So let's say 180, but it's between 150 and 180, depending on how young your bobbies were getting married, right? And that is not as complex a chain to keep in touch with, especially if you think that from Abraham and Sarah until all the way back to Adam and Eve, there were just 20 gals. It's like, okay, Chava to Sarah, 20, and then 180 to me. So we've got 200 women. I could stand in my own home with every one of my direct ancestors. Now, that line is very precious to me, and it makes more sense to me that if God made the world and he wanted to communicate, he made it for a reason, and he was going to communicate that purpose. And if he was going to communicate the purpose, he would darn well make sure that message was kept intact. That would be part of the medium of the message. You would have to give the message in a way that it's going to survive 200 generations or 180 generations. That's logical. And for me personally, I mean, that's more, let's say, epistemological approach and philosophical, the grounds of knowledge. I can say this, when I first came to Lubavitch, people said to me, how could you do that? Like people in Lubavitch, they give up faith in God for faith in the Rebbe. Then I encountered his teachings, and then I saw the Rebbe. he was unlike any other person I had ever encountered. And I felt like this is a voice from the other side. This is what I'm listening to. Like I've been sniffing around this planet. I've had my ear to the ground. I just like, give it to me. And no one had it. And then the Rebbe started speaking. And I think, Simon, didn't you have I don't want to, say anything that isn't accurate, but the Rebbe spoke about a prophecy and was asked, are you saying this as wishful thinking or as a vision?
A prophecy about GEULA, to be specific.
Yes, and my understanding is that the Rebbe said that this was a prophecy, and to me it's like a domino effect. If one thing he said is not true, then I can't rely on anything. I mean, just pull the rug out from under me.
Simon, you want to speak to that?
This is sounding more like a Chabad seminar now.
Well, we said
I don't think
real.
so, Simon. I'm speaking about the grounds of knowledge and how do we know anything?
Okay, I will speak to that very directly. Just to put it a little more in universal terms, if I may. I think it's vital before we even talk about the Mashiach, GEULA. I'm not sure who the audience here is, but I don't want to assume anything. I think the stereotypes and the myths are abound that if without dispelling one or two of them, it's hard to talk about this. So if you don't mind, can I do that for a moment?
Please.
Okay. If we look at GEULA and Mashiach, and let's strip it from the Hebrew, I'll go back to the language I used before. Let's call it the realization of the purpose of existence, the destination of a journey that began thousands of years ago with every good deed, every mitzvah, every sacrifice, any human being contributed, man, woman, or child, Jew or non-Jew, all are little building blocks that accumulate to a world that will be a divine garden, exactly as God intended it to be, and even better than it was in the beginning of creation. If we define that as the redemption, then it demystifies it from a lot of the mumbo jumbo and magical stuff, because basically it's what every one of us believes. We want a world of world peace, no famine, no, using the language of Maimonides, no anger, no unhealthy competition, a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, a world where materialism would be a means towards spiritual and transcendent growth. So if you take it that way, then, and then the Rebbe comes into the picture as a visionary in the line of many and says, hey, that work has been accumulating over the years, and now we're at the stage where it's about to erupt. Put it in that context, you don't need any particular faith, frankly, even. I mean, you could say, how does he know? Does he have the credentials? So in that context, what Shimona said, I totally agree with. If you see the Rebbe as an authority, but I can make the case even if you don't even never heard of who this Rebbe is. And we're talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe. Even if you don't mention him, the idea that we've accumulated after all these years, I mean, where are all the good deeds gone? Where are all the sacrifices that we paid? What about all the suffering that we endured? So to me, it's a complete, then when the Rebbe comes and says it, it's not like out of the blue, a man suddenly arose and said, hey, you know what? We're reaching the destination. He's speaking with thousands of years of history behind him, with a lot of, besides what his vision is, and besides his spiritual perspective, besides whatever God tells him. So I think if you put it in that context, it's just a little more palatable. That's all I wanted to really address. So I don't think it contradicts or, God forbid, on the contrary, I think it just complements what Shimona said. Would you agree, Shimona?
I do.
And that's how I see it, absolutely.
And Simon, for me, that, prior to mentioning the Rebbe was a more universal context, if you put it in that, which is that if there's going to be a message about meaning and purpose that was a one-time event to serve all of humanity, to me, that is a vital piece of the answer to this question. that one would assume that God would make the communication in such a way that it was sustainable, it was self-sustaining, and
absolutely, or else the whole Torah falls apart.
Perpetuated in its pure state.
The entire Torah falls apart if you don't have that. Right. If you don't have that, you know the game telephone. I whisper to you the word apple. By the time we go around the table, it's elephant.
Snapple.
That's right. Snapple is good. But here's the same room, the same amount of people, the same period. There's no way that God did not build in an immunity system that the Torah would be passed on, because that's the first question that I had when I was a teenager. How do we know the integrity was preserved? How do we know what we have today was given to us? Who knows? Maybe someone whispered the wrong word. And we did go through ordeals. It's not like we had a peaceful transition here. So there's no question. If you believe in God, you believe in the Torah, you have to believe that in its immutability, in its communication, that the people
which brings us back to that notion of authenticity,
right,
and integrity that we were on at the beginning. You know, there has to be personal integrity, and then communal integrity, and philosophical, and at every level. There are
Rabbi Katz. We should hear from Rabbi Katz. I'm tired of hearing myself.
You guys are doing great. Keep up the good work. I believe in you. Shem should bless you.
Amen.
It should be so good to see GEULA at our time. Sometime in the next 2.5 hours, we're just going to drag this out until Mashiach walks up. Then we'll ask for feedback, what we got right and wrong in our little GEULA gathering over here. I think
you know the story with it? Yeah.
Besides that, what do you have to say on those?
You know, I never came through the Chabad path, and being that I'm a teacher for the last 10 years of Torah, unfortunately, you know what I mean? I never get to hear other teachers speak about stuff because I'm usually too busy learning from books to teach myself. So it's a pleasure just to hear other people and their journeys. I love Chabad. I have a son called Shnei Zalman, and you can work after who. But I have, I didn't come through the Chabad approach. I came through every other system. I have a lot of Rebbe Rashab on my shelves and all the other good teachers. So for me,
coming from your perspective, what would your response be to a question? How do we know that we're not delusional?
Well, there's so many other points of beauty and depth that you've all brought up. So I'm just I can go back to that question. I think we've spent a good amount of time on that question. It could be a 5-hour discussion if we give like an hour to each question. Perhaps we should. For me, the essence of the GEULA, you know, why have they gone wrong with the Shabtai Tzvi? I think you hit the nail on the head with the Eitz Chaim and the Eitz Das Tov Ra. I mean, it's interesting. I'll be very careful what I say, and I think we'll understand the implications. People that are only involved with the halacha and only involved with the details and only involved with the chumrah, they don't suddenly get to messianic complexes very much in history. Because they're involved with the details, and GEULA is a big picture thinking. It's a global vision. It's an integrative understanding. It's a holistic view of reality. It involves understanding, as the Zohar says, how all of science and lower wisdom, all of the higher wisdom will be integrated. The whole world will come. Peace does not just mean people not fighting. Shalom bayis doesn't just mean to not be yelling at your husband or yelling at your wife. That's not a very ambitious view of marriage. I'm just looking to someone I cannot yell at for the next 120 years. Now, shalom actually means shleimut, which means perfection and harmony. It means all the elements at play unite together and become more than the sum of their parts. So the idea to have world peace in that sense is the idea that Jew and non-Jew, science and technology, and Kabbalah and Hasidus and Halacha all integrate. I mean, Halacha, the Jewish legal code, is the gematria Kli. It really is a vessel, and revelation comes from the light. And what's interesting to me is these people that have these visions and Mashiach, it's because they step out of the detail-focused reality, the mundane reality, the stuck habitual reality. And that can also be mitzvahs anashim milamada, that I'm a religious person, but I'm following the mitzvahs by rote and the details by rote. But on the inside, it's possible there could be such a person. I feel I'm dying. I feel I don't have that connection. And all of the great failed messiahs, all had a moment of revelation. Having been doing a lot of meditation stuff around the world and doing a lot of research about, people that may take ayahuasca and suddenly think they're the Messiah, right? Or a person that comes, Jerusalem, is a Jerusalem complex, whatever it is, they come here and they get hit by this incredible light, and they suddenly feel the Mamash Mashiach. This is a tragic story, not really for this forum, but I had an old friend from Yeshiva. I got a call in the middle of the night a couple of years ago that I hadn't spoken to this wonderful young man for probably 10, 15 years. His wife called me and said, please come over to the house, it's emergency. And I got to the house and he was on the ground, held down by policemen, having a psychotic breakdown, which is unbelievably heartbreaking. His kids were being ushered out of the room. I don't know why they called me at all. And he was saying, I'm Mashiach and you're Mashiach, and Mashiach is going to come. And that is obviously devastating and delusional and awful. And I'm going to say something for some people may be heresy or irresponsible, but I honestly believe that when people are able to access a deeper place, a transcendent place, and they get hit by seeing the big picture and the beauty of everything and the unity of everything and the potential light in the world, then that is the beginning of the messianic revelation. But as Shimona was saying, the definition of GEULA is, this famous debate we have by our great sages. Is GEULA is the world to come ultimately, that we have no bodies and we only have a spiritual world. And so many of the Kabbalists say, no, it's the world to come is in this world. And the Baal Shem Tov said a person can experience the world to come in this world already. And therefore, the ultimate redemptive vision is that there is light and there is vessel, and they are so unified, there's almost no distinction. The light is married to the vessel, and that's true shalom. That's the shalom of the vessel, the zach and the keva, the mishpia and makabel. The physicality is illuminated, luminescent, whatever that word would be, with spirituality, that you don't even see physicality as physicality. You see it as divine expression, revelation, one and the same. So for me, you see that happening in the world of technology today. You see that happening in the internet, which is both disastrous and unbelievably beautiful in its true power to unify all of human consciousness. Mola Ha'aretz De'ez Hashem, the whole will be full of one united consciousness together. And we see science moving as to a place where we don't have to work as much, where we can be more thoughtful, when we can spend more time in reflection, that mindfulness, so many modalities in psychology allowed human beings to advance beyond trauma and pain. Mindfulness has gone mainstream, that we can work mindfully, which sounds a lot more like what the Baal Shem Tov would teach, or Rav Nachman would teach about, bringing consciousness into the world. I'm not saying they're exactly comparable, but you see that the world is moving in a be'ita achishen, as the Zohar says, in an exponential rate. You see that global consciousness is coming together. You see that technology is developing, that humans are becoming much more sophisticated in understanding of reality. You see as much of our society has challenges today, you see that all of our yelling back and forward politically is who's more moral and who's more ethical, and he's immoral, he's unethical. And whether you love or hate the Me Too movement, or you love or hate all these movements, it's about people standing up for justice and truth. Whether they're right or wrong is a separate point. But I see a very morally compelled society to a flaw. But you see that there's an incredible movement forward. And for me, the great visionaries have accessed this light. They've accessed the sense of unity. They've accessed the vision of what's possible, that I saw spirituality, I saw light, even in my hands, even in the physical world. But what's lacking, being lacked by those people that have fallen, is they haven't done the discipline and the hard work. They haven't followed the halacha. They haven't worked out how to integrate that back into the law. When the soul and the body come together, that's GEULA. When a person has that supernatural vision on the ayahuasca, on the LSD, but they fall back into their body, they're creating further division because they don't know how to integrate the two. When a person can live with the halacha, the details, and see beauty and divinity in everyday life, but experience that unity and transcendence, and those two are no longer separate. When we don't have a distinction between Hasidim and Misnagdim, or Hasidim and Halacha, and no one who really teaches Hasidus thinks that there's a distinction at all. But it's when we all live with the Vekas and practice it, that's the integrated path that I believe the world is headed for. And I think when individuals popped out into higher consciousness, then they got the messianic concept in their head, because they were exposed to a light and a potential, but they weren't able to integrate that. And often you see they strayed from halacha, or they bend halacha, because we have to bend halacha into GEULA, and that's always the disaster. But I think this idea of, one of my dreams has always been to, and I always say I'll get to this one day, after teaching the whole world about Dvekas, I've always wanted to create a class where we teach Kabbalah and Chassidus next to halacha as one and the same. as Rav Kook said, that there's no longer separation between the halachic part of the Talmud and the agadic part of the Talmud. When then there's no longer, there's the Hasidim and everybody else, or there's no longer those in Dveikus, and then those who are very strict into halacha. When all these divisions fall apart, then I think people will attain the vision en masse. Malahad's Deus Hashem. The whole will be full of divine consciousness, but we'll integrate that into the discipline of profound halachic living. And that for me is the vision, that there's unity, there's integration, there's perfection, there's holistic understanding internally and externally. And I don't think that's a delusion, because I think that the delusion is when it's not integrated. I believe a lot of those people who are delusional are actually having high-level downloads and access, but they're too full of dimyon. Their midas aren't mitukan, their midas aren't fixed, so it becomes chaotic. But when we can access the light, and we've built the kli to integrate it, I think that will be no longer delusion, no longer destructive. That will be the ultimate power of something that we can really build and integrate for all of the world. That's how I think about it.
Well said. I would love it if you would, actually someone asked this, there are a bunch of questions now. Someone asked you to explain a little bit more about what you mean when you say Dveikus. So if we could just, since you've used
what a Dveikus?
Yeah, what do you mean when you say, define it, and then what do you mean by it?
Dveikus is a very boring subject, which is brought down in the Torah as a mitzvah. It's brought down in halacha. Dveikus is according to many sources, a mitzvah from the Torah commandment as a state of consciousness. Dveikus is a state that you get to when you go high above the average thinking normal state called das, and you go into access a state called chachma, and in that place you experience divine unity between yourself and the source of all reality. It's a state of bliss, which is Lamalam and Azman, Lamalam and Amakam. You feel outside time. You feel not limited by your fears and your doubts. You feel a deeper sense of your true self and your true purpose. You feel unbelievably surrounded by love and connection with the divine source in all things. Our physical fears and doubts of a lifetime and lifetimes often melt away. Harim kedonag namasum lifnei Hashem, the Baal Tanya says. Our fears and doubts, that mountains, the Yetzer Hara, melt away like wax. And it is the spiritual experience which all wisdom traditions are put as the goal in some degree, whether they preach it as dogma or they've actually mastered it themselves is a question. And it's really something I believe that the Baal Shem Tov brought back to the table. According to many Hasidic texts, the Dveikus, they quote the Zohar as saying that all of Tarek mitzvahs, all of the mitzvahs are 613 Eitzot, pieces of advice of how to achieve living with divine consciousness. Mindfulness is often, many people practice mindfulness for medical reasons, technical reasons, and suddenly, 1 in 100, suddenly as they're doing it, they kind of blast out of their body and they experience a divine light. They see the light. They have insights, revelation. They have a message from the divine soul from other great tzaddikim, other great masters. So it is a state of consciousness where we are bound with the divine, the nefesh elokis, the divine source within, and we experience the blessing, light, and revelation from that place. This is a meditational technique against popular opinion. This is not only for tzaddikim. This is a part of our tradition. It was a key that the Baal Shem Tov, a key the Maggid of Mezrich would discuss of all the Hasidic masters, and their goal was to live life in the state. They saw the essence of Hasidus was to live light in that state, live life in that state, live light in that state as well, and bring that state into everything, into eating, into intimacy, into work. And when a person lives life in that state, they experience divinity with all things. As the Tanya himself says, when a person can access that part of themselves, then automatically they love other Jews, and automatically they love other people, because they're living from the state where they automatically experience how we're all brothers and sisters and interconnected together. So this is the beginning. I believe that the true beginning of the end in a positive way is the more that we can learn, not just as a metaphor, as an intellectual teaching that we are divine beings. But we learned that the Hasidic masters from the Baal Shem Tov on were saying that this is accessible to every potato farmer. And this is our true heritage, and this is the baseline of Torah. And I believe that Torah practice, even with beautiful intellectual ideas, without true experience, which is what Baal Shem Tov says, prayer is supposed to be 3 times a day, an experience of that divine connection, that his kashrus, that we experience that light. And I believe even if we live mitzvahs on a daily level, but we don't have that reference point. It's not a part of our experience. then it's very, very hard to hold on. We can maybe even for a generation or two, but this is the true experience of the light, and it's the true knowledge of the light, and it's more than language of an intellectual idea, which it is, but it's the highest and deepest experience. It's not the end game, it's the beginning game from how we can learn to live on a different platform as Jews in the world. So I can speak about this for a long time, as you can imagine, but that's a little about Dveikus. I'm sure the other two, a few Holy Yidden here, also have their own take, and I'd be very excited to hear whatever they have to say.
Other people?
That's you two. You're the other people here. Yes.
Shimona, you look like you might have something to say. Yes, no?
I don't know much about Dveikus. What's that song? Don't know much about history books.
Oh, yeah. I
like what someone said. Don't know much about Dveikus.
What about chapter 80 to 9 of Tanya? You sound like you've heard Tanya before.
Yeah, no, I mean personally experienced. I can't speak from experience. I've cleaved to other things, but not God. I mean, I adore God and I yearn for God, but I haven't. I'm always running after him. You know, Tzomelecho nafshi. My soul thirsts for you. I don't think that on my interview with Shifra Hendre, I was speaking to about what drew Moshe Rabbeinu and Moses to the burning bush, and you know, it was that he saw it was burning, but it wasn't being consumed. There was no combustion. And the Rebbe speaks about it from a different perspective. I mean, I'm sure it's elsewhere, but that was my portal where he says that the righteous are often envious of the simple people because simple people can't slake their thirst. It's just, you can't quench it. You know, you're just always thirsty, and you don't, let me say I, not you, because I don't mean you, of course, and I don't mean any of the listeners. I mean myself.
Proverbial I and you, yes.
Yeah, well, this is the personal I, not the proverbial. And
okay, personal I, the proverbial you. Okay.
I'm madly in love with God. I've been looking for him from the time I can remember being conscious, and I want to be connected to God, and I get in my own way. And when one has very elevated powers of focus, das, and of concentration, and a broad and deep knowledge base, then I'm sure that there's that, you know, then that one is primed for that, for the dveikus, for the cleaving. I don't want to be, you know, continual spoke in the wheel. I'm just speaking personally, which is that I'm crazy about him, but it's hard to get there. And I think that is, as what I understand, why the righteous are envious of the simple proletariat people, because when you don't have the waters of consciousness to slake your thirst, then that fire is going to keep on burning. And, you know, it's like kol doidi dofek. My heart just keeps on knocking, and there's that flame. And I think there's something very beautiful about that as well, the pursuit. Running off, just this, you know, this light was one of my favorite lines in the prophets, where we're told, you know, you left Egypt and you went after me in the desert. I remember the days. Zacharti la chesed noraich. I remember the kindness of your youth. Lech techacharai bamidbar. You went after me in the desert like this young bride, and I see brides get married. They're so full of hope, and you know, there's this innocence. There's a certain innocence and a commitment to your life together, and that's how we have been with God. I think that we have, whether we've experienced it or not, we have really run after him like a devoted bride for thousands of years. And you know, GEULA is like the groom coming and saying, okay, like.
Shimona, I want to take the spoke out of your hands, so you don't have to be the spoken. I'll have a go at being the spoke in the wheel. Just because
that will be such a relief. Go,
Great.
Shifra.
I'll put today the part of the spoke will from this moment
And
with Rav
then
Doniel Katz.
I'll try and grow a ginger beard and be full of light.
I
And wear a
frankly
tall
think
hat.
you're doing just fine without the beard. I don't know if spoke. Everything you said is so beautiful. That talk about, you know, Sadiq and the envious of the potato farmers is so beautiful. On a very mundane, practical, real world way, given that I think all four of us are dedicated to not just speaking a deeper Torah, but making that deeper transformational Torah accessible on the widest possible level. I think that's something we've all given our hearts to, not as a good thing to do. I think that's our shorish neshama, root soul. When these ideas that I speak about, Dveikus, in 2019, I've met literally thousands of people around the world. Some of them are religious, and some of them are secular Jews, and many of them are non-Jews. And they've had such profound spiritual experiences, not on the Torah path. I saw a TED video, which has the halachic status of Chazal in our generation as a quotable source, of you know, a wonderful man talking about doing cutting edge research of DMT and MDMA, and having, you know, dealing with, you know, people traumatized for decades, and, you know, incredible depression that no medicine can help. In a few sessions, this person's having incredible breakthrough. And one of the lines, he's standing in front of the, you know, cutting edge TED audience saying, you know, all this kind of wisdom about higher consciousness can heal people of their wounds and all this kind of stuff. And then he drops in this funny sideline. He said, you know, all this, when I first had an LSD trip when I was 18, and I saw the unity of all the reality, and I saw we're all interconnected. And I saw, he actually says this in the TED Talk, you can check it out. And he said, and I realized from the LSD, he said, that's what my parents wanted me to get for my bar mitzvah, but me or anyone else, no one got that from my bar mitzvah, and everybody laughed. And I just sat there going, oh, that's tragic, because really that is the experience that so all the Sfarim are talking about. I believe with all my heart, that's what the Tanya is talking about in chapter 18 and 19. And therefore the challenge to me is, while I almost want to flip your Torah, why Gedolim can, and I don't know if it's the biggest Gedolim, but the relative Gedolim, relative Mishpiyim, they can keep going on the cheshik, on the desire, that I'm yearning to connect. I don't believe that so many of the generation can. I don't believe Jews today can. And I especially think that many people in our generation are experiencing many different ways and platforms. If it's Buddhist meditation retreats or mindfulness apps, they're experiencing the light, and they're experiencing unity and oneness with themselves in reality, and having spiritual awakenings and I'm quoting literally hundreds of people sent me letters I've spoken to where decades of Torah and mitzvahs never gave me that. I heard them talk about that, but no one showed me how to get there. And that, therefore, being the spoke that I've grabbed out of your hands in an appropriate kind of a way, I kind of wonder whether we can afford, as global thinking GEULA teachers, to only speak to the theory that yearning is enough, and whether it's time that we, and obviously I'm biased because this is something I've taken on as a passion, to teach the practice that the Baal Shem Tov was speaking, to teach the practice that is in Kuntres Avoda by the Rebbe Shep, to teach these practices that Rav Nachman is speaking, to experience the light. I'm scared that if we can't move out of the language of theory into the language of practice, we may push off the GEULA, and we may push off our brothers and sisters from being connected to the true source when the GEULA comes. And I believe just the final spoke in the wheel to fire up the conversation. I believe this is the core of the letter from the Baal Shem Tov wrote to his brother-in-law. That I believe the way I understand the reading of that text is that Mashiach will come, the sign of Mashiach will come, not when everybody's learning Chassidus, but the explicit text is when everybody can do the Yechudim and the Aliyahs like the Baal Shem Tov could. And that's what gives the Baal Shem Tov yish. I think the Baal Shem Tov had to have enough amunah in Chabad to get Torah out there on Chabad.org. I think could pull it off. But what bewildered the Baal Shem Tov is they can do the Yechudim and Aliyahs, they can do Dveikus. And that's the miracle that I think we're starting to see. That for me, I don't have to have faith in GEULA. You see the world moving in consciousness towards something very exactly in this direction, and that's why I'm very curious about, is that the next level of Jewish education that could move us towards GEULA?
Let me say this, if I may. May I?
Please. Because
I want to make sure there's no misunderstandings here, since we're talking about spokes.
Wait. Who's got the spoke now?
We keep handing the stick.
I guess Simon can be the spokesman right now.
I will say the following. I'll say the following. Just to make it absolutely clear, my perspective on it, which I think is not just my perspective, but actually an objective truth. The entire motto of Yafutsu Ma'anesecha Chutza, which are the three words the Baal Shem Tov heard from the Mashiach, when he asked him when he will come, when will the redemption come? He says, your wellsprings will be disseminated to the outskirts, to the farthest outskirts, is exactly the driving engine behind the entire Hasidic movement, and including, of course, the entire Chabad movement. So when the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman, composed Tanya, and then the hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of discourses that he delivered, and then his son delivered, and all the generations of the Rebbes delivered, and we're talking about a corpus of writings that are literally tens of thousands of pages. I'll sum it up in one word. It's a formula. It's a formula not for education and learning alone. It's all about scholarship and experience and a total integrative, holistic fusion of spirit and matter, of body and soul. And I'll put it in more contemporary language, a complete psycho-spiritual modality of what a healthy human being is like, where everything is integrated, where the faculties and, yes, the energies and the containers are all aligned with each other, as opposed to chaotic or even shattered. And all those texts are meant to be one thing and one thing only: how we should implement that in our personal lives. So I'm not sure, Rabbi Katz, whether you suggested otherwise, but I will say.
No, that's it. That's why we love it. That's what we want. Let's play the spoke. What did you hear that suggested that I suggested otherwise?
I thought you were saying that we need to do that. Obviously.
No, that's what we're doing. But
let me finish what I want to say.
Yeah, please.
So my point was this. I personally grew up in the Chabad movement, and when I rose in the ranks, I became the main writer of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's talks. It was my main claim to fame, which consisted of remembering verbatim hours and hours of Farbrengens and talks delivered on Shabbos and holidays where there were no notes and no recordings. So I had direct access and so on. So I could say I've been 40 years in my professional life immersed in this type of work. And like yourself, I probably met tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, Jews and non-Jews, all walks of life. And that's exactly the work I'm dedicated to, which is to translate this language, this model into language that people of all backgrounds who may not know Hebrew or may not have the education, into a working psychological, spiritual, and emotional system that actually works in whether it's character refinement, whether it's personal growth, or getting rid of demons, or we can call it dveikus, which is a way of, dveikus. I always like to think of dveikus as like two flames that don't just connect, but they join together as one. Whereas like hiskashrus, for example, is like taking two objects and they don't necessarily become one, but when you take two flames or two drops of water, they actually become one. So really aligning ourselves to our spiritual purpose. And I totally agree then and concur that this is definitely not only the paradigm of the future. And the more of us that are involved in teaching and educating this integrative approach, each in their own way, different teachers have great different qualities, focusing on different elements, is exactly correct. Preparing people who are absolutely receptive of all walks of life, and the need is there, the material is there. So when I see these three words, I say, Yefutz Ma'anesecha Chutza, I say, Ma'anesecha is the teachings, the product, the content. Chutza is the marketplace, which is the entire world. And Yefutzu essentially is distribution. Translating it and distributing it to different target audiences according to their needs. So I just wanted to just weigh in and say, absolutely, if that's what you were saying, and we're all saying the same thing, then that's exactly, my life mission is completely captured exactly what I just articulated to some extent.
Beautiful.
There are a couple of questions that come up based on these comments. One of them is, I guess, to you, Rav Doniel. What is the difference for you between the spiritual drug-induced spiritual experiences or the Jerusalem syndrome that you mentioned, which I agree with you. It is, I think in most cases, people are tapping into something. And the Dveikus experience that comes through the Torah, through the Eitz Hadas and the Eitz HaChaim. What do you see as the difference there? And the other thing that I just wanted to say before you answer is, and speaking to Simon, it seems like it, I think this is maybe obvious, but I just want to say it in case. It doesn't only refer obviously to others, but obviously there are parts, and the Rebbe spoke to this a lot also, as we all know, there are parts of us that are also called out, the outer reaches, the places where, like Shimona entered the whole conversation, initiated this whole discussion by talking about this. There are parts of us where GEULA has not reached, and GEULA and Chassidus and truth and God and Dveikus has to reach into those places. And that's, I think we're all speaking to that in different ways, but I'm just going to turn over to you with a question about spiritual experiences through the Torah, not through the Torah. What's the difference that you see? Drugs, not drugs. I'm
very fascinated in this subject. I've done a lot of research of speaking to psychiatrists, of speaking to people that have had psychotic breakdowns. Insanity has actually always been a hobby of mine. I've always found it a fascinating thing. So I don't want to overspeak this point at all. So I will give a brief version. And I'm also cautious that I realize there's a few things that you can never post about on Facebook or social media, right? Without, getting anything to do with Trump, good or bad, someone's going to hate you for it. Apparently going to Uman for Rosh Hashanah is equally as contentious. And mental illness, there's a lot of people that feel they have ownership over discussions about mental illness, positive, negatively. There's a lot of pain that people have been through, and it's something to be very sensitive about. So with all that, the only thing I want to say is, obviously, I am not comparing in some way a drug, an artificially induced state, to that of the highest spiritual masters. I just want to make a distinction. I'm not sitting here saying LSD is a Torah equivalent to the spiritual mastery at all, number one. And now that's my responsible hat. And now I'm not going to tramp on my irresponsible hat, but just to broaden the conversation. In all of Hasidus and all of Kabbalah, and again, amongst Chabad fans, perhaps outside the Ari, there's no teaching in Torah that has comprehensively mapped out all of human consciousness than the Chabad masters. And they break down unbelievably comprehensively all the elements of consciousness, how they work, how to access each one, how to go down and up, and in countless extraordinary ways. And if only we could bring them to the table, I think that would change the game, if nothing else. Number one, when you hear a person who takes LSD, who takes an ayahuasca experience, you strip off the drug language. You cannot help but notice that many, many times, and just to keep myself safe, let's say not all times, but many times, they are describing experiences that Torah spiritual masters have been describing for literally thousands of years. And I can break down the properties, right? It's again, it's a sense of bliss. It's a sense of transcendence of the physical. It's a sense of the unity of all of reality. It's a sense of seeing past lives like many tzaddikim did and understanding the context in it. It's a sense of feeling their pain has dissipated. It's a sense of has pashtus agashmius. And it's all these kind of elements. People actually say they go up into the world, they see the soul of all these things, etc. Now, and some of that you could say is delusion. There's another traditional thing which is called the bad trip or an ayahuasca ceremonies. And I bring them up because they're unbelievably popular today, even within some areas and certain religions in the world, people are going to this. I'm bringing that up as a topic of relevant conversation to spiritual seekers and being real with that. They often either go up, and therefore they describe all the classic supernatural experience that the Hasidic masters discuss, or they go down into the Heichal Tuma, and they bring up a lifetime of trauma and feel, and they collapse underneath it. In most cases, and absolutely not all of them, many people find that deeply therapeutic. Somehow by going down and experiencing light and experience darkness and wrestling with that and wrestling with their quote unquote demons. And that's a very scary word to use because there are real demons and there are emotional demons. And it's not so easy where that line, is down. So they also describe things and have that are discussed as part of tikkun midas and inner work. Therefore, I am not quick as a teacher to dismiss that is all drugs and drugs is insignificant. I do believe that and it doesn't also mean that everything you experience in a drug-induced state is truth or is higher truth as well, right? So I'm not saying that, but I will go on the line from my learning and life experience to say, while I in no way recommend people try it because these things are way too volatile with all kinds of potentially negative outcomes, people who have been there and done that, it can open up a world for them of deeper understanding. It can give them an access point to sometimes go when they're learning Chassidus, oh my gosh, I've been there. I will be honest with you, I spent a bit of time in a meditation retreat when I was growing up. And having some very profound experiences. And when I first learned Tanya, one of the things just lit up for me when I got to chapter 18 and 19, and I was learning with a nice young Chabad rabbi, and he was telling me these beautiful Torah. But I looked at this page and said, oh, I've done that. And I remember, no, you haven't. No, I've really, I know that. And I can tell you about that place. And what I found is some people who had those experiences and hallucinogenics have also done that. So I have also experienced that as a reference point. So I consider that relevant to the discussion. The problems are when you go into that state, number one, again, besides bad environments, besides bad drugs and psychotic breakdowns and all these things that happen, the challenges are, number one, that you have a high experience, but you've never worked through your midas, you've never worked through your demionis, you never worked through your trauma. You can have trauma around you, and that can contaminate or distort potential vision or positive experience, number one. Number two is, and this is key, and you especially see this a lot with ayahuasca, is when a person is living a life disconnected from truth, disconnected from a healthy self, a healthy environment, higher truth, higher wisdom, and they're in a miserable, disconnected, stuck, anxious state, and they experience that light, they cannot integrate it, number one. Two is it can make them feel more disconnected, more frustrated. And then three is because they now feel so full and so broken, they have a yish about themselves. And therefore the only way they can get back there is through the drug or through the thing that initially lifted them up. And they often don't have a path or an understanding how I could integrate in a balanced, healthy way, in a way that I could begin to re-feel and reconnect to that positivity, that light, that sense of unity. And I believe when Torah is taught correctly with living experiential Chassidus and the depth of Chassidus, then a person can truly, and I don't mean this theoretically as in we should do this, but we learn to do this and we must do this, as Rabbi Simon was saying before, to teach the theory and halakhic aspects in a way that builds the mensch, builds the person in a healthy way, introduces the light. And even though, yes, it demands more discipline, it's a holistic way to integrate yourself that when you slowly build up that ladder, you can attain those experiences in an integrated, healthy way.
Yeah, I want to add also having a lot of experiences in the New Age movement. It's very easy. Somebody just posted on Facebook with people listening in 3 different places, but posted that with these experiences mean nothing without meaning. I think that I think about this a lot. People ask me about this a lot. I think that it's possible for a spiritual awareness to be very ego-based and to lead you down the wrong path in that way also. Like, I think it's just, I agree with you that it can be very, that many people are having deeper spiritual experiences than the average human ever had before. And that's part of GEULA. And I think it's very powerful. I think it's also a step on the ladder to the consciousness that the Baal Shem Tov, was talking about, that the Rebbeim are talking about, that the Torah talks about. Ultimately, we're meant to see what God sees, not just to be aware that there's something more, or to think that it's just us. We're part of it, obviously, but it's not just
100%. I just want to say that the Baal Shem Tov says that danger not just about drugs. The Baal Shem Tov says that explicitly in a couple of teachings about Dveikus. He says when a person accesses Dveikus, they have to be extra careful of gaiva, of ego in there, because you start going, hey, look, I'm a tzaddik, look, I'm transcended, just like people do in drugs, just like people do in meditation. Attaining an authentic high can induce ego, and that always has to be held in. But that must be integrated with true wisdom, and it must be integrated deeply in an authentic way. Otherwise, addiction mentalities come in, and that becomes highly destructive.
Almost everything can either connect you or separate you. That's the bottom line. And I think that's the ultimate shlemut that everybody was talking about, that you especially were talking about, that, you know, when that the Torah, and GEULA, which will ultimately bring peace, will bring peace between the ego and the soul, peace between, you know, inner experience and greater truth, all of that. And it all has to be mediated till we get to the absolute.
And
please.
Something. People hear this biblical law that if a slave wanted to go free, he would have to have his ear kind of bolted,
banged up.
And they think that it's horrible. But I think we have a lot of that in our culture today in terms of social welfare. I understand there has to be social welfare in a country, but the idea of a government giving handouts and keeping people alive, as opposed to communities doing that privately without Big Brother managing that, is the idea of a slave not wanting to go free and then being attached to the door of the master. Just the master in this case is the government. And the reason I mention it in this case is because the Torah speaks about lechem, you know, only the bread of hunger, and there's also the bread of shame. Like, you don't want to eat the bread of shame. And it's something that has swept through the world, this idea of let's get as much as we can from Big Brother. It doesn't matter if it's the American government or communism, just I want to get all of that. Something happens fundamentally to an individual when they are not supporting themselves. When God says, "B'zir sapecha," you will live by the sweat of your brow, there's a great blessing in that, because sweat is very cleansing. I know in America people try not to sweat. Like elsewhere they sweat, and there's lots of hormones in the sweat, and it's actually very sexual, and people celebrate sweat. In America, it's like you don't want to sweat, and you don't want to sweat by work by the sweat of your brow. Something is corrupted in our beings with those handouts. And I think that there is a parallel when it comes to moments of revelation. When you do it by the sweat, like we're taught, you can't make progress without hot water and cold water, without sweat and tears. Okay, blood, sweat, and tears. So when you're doing that, we keep on referencing bands and songs. But when you do that, and there is this cleansing, you did the work, then you own where you land, as opposed to kind of this amorphous. New Age language is extremely amorphous, and drug experiences aren't sustainable. But when you have a moment of cleaving that is real, then your life is different after that. You know, and we know where things come from by where they lead to. And when you look at the opioid crisis that's going on now, I mean, look, that's what happens when the corporates take over the drug industry. It's just heroin, but it's being sold through, you know, the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals and doctors. I mean, really, the nurses and the doctors were the first people that the opioid crisis hit, because it was right there for them. Now, you know where something is coming from by where it leads to. The kind of work that, I don't know if I shared this with you, Shifra Hendre, but on our interview, but maybe I told it to you another time. But when my son Levi was little, we were sitting in our dining room, and it was so little, it was packed with books, like every wall was covered in books. And he said to me, "Ma, you've got to have the most expensive wallpaper in the whole world." And I said, "Yeah, I think it is." And then I looked at him, maybe he was 8 or 9, and I said, "But Levi, could you imagine if we could get that wallpaper into the world? Like, how that would look, how remarkable the world would be, you know. And a couple of months ago, he was at a gathering. I think I put this on Facebook, and he was a mentor at a gathering for young students, and, you know, leading and directing them. And I told him how much joy it gave me afterwards. And he said, you know what I was thinking, Mom? About the wallpaper. It's like, wow, you know. So when you open it and you learn it and you study it, and then you work on yourself and you're trying to refine, like hold in a bad word about someone, it's that simple. Or, you know, give a little more charity than you're comfortable with, or wait, you know, choose a different garment because it will be more modest, and maybe it will cover your body, but it will reveal your soul. Those little tweaks that are done in alignment with the learning and then the prayer. So you have the intellect and the heart just talking to God and praying, and the behavior. Then I think that is like eating bread with money that you earned. It's a different, you're in a different place.
Let me weigh in, if I may, on this.
Thank you.
I too have been extremely intrigued always. This topic. Many of my students were serious acid droppers in the 60s, and tried every type of mushroom, every type of psychedelic experience. So I did a lot of comparing notes, besides reading up on all the Timothy Leary and Aldous Huxley literature.
Hoffman.
Yeah. So I want to say the following. First of all, long before the Baal Shem Tov, and long before the Hasidic masters and the Kabbalists and so on, we have the Torah, the written Torah itself, anticipated this issue. We have the story of Nadav and Avihu, the children of Aaron, who rush into the Holy of Holies. And what does the Torah say? They get consumed by what? By an expression that is as contemporary as it gets, by Zara, by a foreign alien fire, which many people are used in the 60s as drugs. They get consumed by it, and they do it all with good intention. They wanted to sanctify God. They were passionate about God. They didn't do it for selfish reasons. And yet, it's considered to be absolutely unacceptable. And to the extent that you have a third chapter, Achrei Mois, Shnei Bnei Aaron, 2 chapters afterwards, that come and say, after the death of the 2 children of Aaron, here is how you shall enter the Holy of Holies. It doesn't say do not enter. Here's the way you do it. Of course, any human being, especially an enlightened human being, wants to connect to the divine in the deepest possible way. Besides the dangers of it, there's the responsibility of it. And then you have, of course, the story in the Talmud. The 4 that entered into the Pardes, into the orchard. Rabbi Akiva, Ben Azai, Ben Sheshes, and Acher. One died, one went mad, one became an apostate, and only one entered in peace and exited in peace. That alone you could write an entire book about, or books. What exactly happened? What did they see? They were all great, great sages. So besides some that you mentioned earlier, the dangers of selfish spirituality and so on, there's a lot more than that. One of the reasons, if I was a Litvak, I don't know if they called them Litvaks back in the time of the Gra, but if I was in the time of the Alter Rebbe and I saw a Hasidic movement with their ecstasy and their spirituality and their dveikus and their prayer and their joy, I'd immediately be the biggest skeptic and say, 1 second, maybe we're not talking about Shaftei Tzvi. Let's say they're holy people, but how do we know they're not going to go over the deep end like Nadav and Avihu and the other 3 people in the Pardes? I have no doubt that many of the scholars were concerned with that. That's why they have the classic line about Kabbalah, where they say those that say don't know and those that know don't say. You know? So as soon as somebody's using Kabbalah, especially if they're adding and making some money on it, you start wondering, 1 second, you know? And I always disqualify myself. As soon as I say that, anything I say about Kabbalah disqualifies me.
Right. That's like the prime way of
So the point I want to make is that and Rabbi Katz said it very well earlier, and I want to say it again, emphasize it because it's critical. The beauty of Judaism is Judaism came to create responsible human beings, not just enlightened individuals. I have met thousands of people who've taken some of the drugs mentioned here, some I don't even want to mention, and so on. And many began with good intentions. Many began, frankly, bored and desperate. Forget about the intentions. I have not seen it all translate into responsible lives, into getting married, having children, being committed to domestic issues. I see a lot of it in being very self-consumed, very enlightened, and not even selfish. Some people are very refined human beings. But when I think about it, I say to myself, look, who are the greatest Western philosopher in history? They say Aristotle. The greatest English writer, Shakespeare. The greatest artist, Rembrandt, whoever, whatever you argue. The greatest musician, Bach, Beethoven. I'm not going to get into a debate about it. Then the next question I want to ask you, and I always say this to audiences, the greatest people in history, tell me, you know the name of their children? Do you even know if they had children, let alone grandchildren? And people start thinking about it. I say, what did they leave us? Books, art, great things. But why did they, if it was such an important legacy, why didn't they teach it to their children and to their grandchildren? And look at Avram Avinu, pioneer of monotheism, as a great artist and brilliant genius just as much as them. And what do you see in the Torah when God says he's about to hide the fact that he's going to destroy Sodom? I find this to be one of the most moving sentences in the entire Torah, where you see God, rare times that he reveals his feelings. He says he's about to hide that he's going to destroy the wicked city of Sodom. Then he says, Hamchasa nima Avram, am I going to conceal from Abraham the fact that I'm going to destroy this wicked city? A man who committed Lamana sheyitzavez bonov vezbese achrav lases doka mishpat. A man who committed his life to build a family that will be dedicated to virtue and justice. To this man, I won't reveal my plan. And I find that to be mind-blowing. I'll tell you why. Because Abraham was a philosopher and he was a thinker. There's no question. He was charismatic. He had it all. I don't know what his spiritual experiences are, but I'm sure comparable to all that we're talking about here. Discovered God on his own in a pagan world. And you know what? He could have easily said, I'm an enlightened individual. I have to write books. I have to produce art. I have a legacy to leave. I have no time for a nagging wife and diapering children. And yet, he transcended his own transcendence with utter humility and bittul, and built a family and dealt with the difficulties. And you know what? Had children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. That, to me, is greater than all the philosophers and all the enlightened people in history. So yes, there's no question a Judaism with only halacha and law can be very dry, or as you put it before, mechanical. And we must have the spirit. But let us not forget, spirituality and enlightenment is not an end in itself. I always marveled by the fact that in Judaism, I remember when I wrote Torah Meaning for Life, and I didn't like the first draft because it sounded too spiritual. What do I mean by that? Because I realized that Judaism teaches us that there is materialism, there's spirituality, and there's God, there's holiness. It's not just two worlds. Most people think, oh, you know what? I'm no longer a materialistic human being. I'm not a capitalist. I'm a spiritualist. And there's a step further. It's called God. And God is neither spiritual nor material. That's why they confuse together. That's why Torah and halacha confused. I'm sorry, halacha and premix Torah confused together. You know, yin and yang, the circle and the square. But ultimately, because we're looking for kedusha, and holiness is not about you. It's something greater than you. It's not about the spiritual you. It's not about the material you. I just wanted to put it into context because it's very misunderstood. And we need to understand that. And spirituality is tremendous. Of course, it transcends materialism. It leads you to places. But it's not an end in itself. Enlightenment has never been an end. I saw, just concluding with one line, I saw the Rebbe once wrote to a conference in London, Jewish mysticism, and he writes the key difference between Jewish mysticism and all other schools of mysticism is that you can reach more with a simple act than with a meditation.
I just want to yes. I
also want to respond, but I guess you want to go into other things.
Go ahead.
I have to say, both. This is why I initially thought 3 hours would be a good amount of time, because it goes very, very fast, and especially with people like this audience and this panel. So I do have questions I want to ask, and we can finish up with this. People are asking more and more questions. There's even a hand up on the phone. I want to say, and then I'll turn it over to you, Shimona, that I feel that this is a perfect example of how we get to a deeper truth. It's been this way throughout the summit, and it's even more emphasized in this particular panel, that there are many perspectives on truth that are true and none completely true. So I just want to encourage anyone listening to hear that all of these things are completely parts of a bigger truth. Yes, we're here to change the world. Yes, we have to do it in accordance with God's plan. Yes, it's not about spirituality, it's not about physicality, but the blending of the two and something much higher than that. Yes, it's not about you, but also yes, it is about you. And it's all of these things are, in my opinion, crucial keys to where we want to go, crucial keys to GEULA, because in the world of GEULA, all of these pieces have been put back together. So it's not about God instead of you or someone else instead of you, and it's not about you instead of God or your ego instead of your soul or your soul instead of your ego. It all is one holistic package, to borrow Rav Katz's wording. So that was what I wanted to say. Shimona?
Thank you. So when I was speaking about this idea of earning our state and speaking about the deeds, the importance of incorporating behavior, which is the tree, guided by the tree of knowledge, I was thinking about something a friend of mine told me. Her grandfather was a chassid, and he would come home late on Shabbat afternoon. Simon had spoken about being at these Hasidic gatherings, and he was one of the scribes who remembered and then recorded what had been taught. But the Rebbe could speak for 6 hours, let's say, and her grandfather would come home and they'd say to him, Zayda, what did the Rebbe say today? And he always smiled and he said to them, I'll say in Yiddish and translate, men darf sein gut und men darf sein frum. You have to be good and you have to be God-fearing. And, it was like, well, what did he say? He said this and this. There was so much philosophy. There was so much depth. But it had to translate into something that was behavioral. And one of the things that I am noticing is how our language has become very universal. It actually, like, I shut down when I hear it. There are 3 words in particular that have been switched out. One is instead of God, the divine, like we want to be universal. See, the problem with universalism is that it doesn't allow you to be specific. The problem with the specific detail is that you lose out on the universality of it. But what Simon's speaking about, which I think is what brought me in, that there's physicality and spirituality, and then there's godliness, which is that third point that transcends and unifies them both. So when you speak about the divine, it's like universal, but then it's not personal. And then we have the planet as opposed to the earth. And now we have humans as opposed to people. So think about this. If you say, there is a divine force that guides the humans on the planet, that's a very different statement from saying God watches the people on earth. And I think that that's something that is vital if we're going to really be redeemed, because as long as things are are being framed in universal ways, well, then there's that camouflage. Here I am with all the redemption, but how are you actually going to do it? Well, all those stories we hear, like Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, known as the lover of Israel, how he went on Yom Kippur and lit a fire for a woman who had just given birth and made sure that she was okay. These small acts, some people like to speak about that, disregarding other things. As we were saying earlier, it's a balance, but I think that it's really important when we speak about redemption to address the notion of personal responsibility and a very intimate personal relationship with God. I am not a human being. I mean, I may be, but okay, mineral, vegetable, animal, human. Like, let's shelve that. And I just want to be a person. I was shocked. Chabad.org sent out something after Poway, and it spoke about humans. I'm like, oh my God, this is deep. This is deep. That we can't speak about people. I'm a person. And I think that that's one of the very bottom steps on this rung to self-mastery and redemption. That's it.
Any other comments before? I just do have to say that words mean different things to different people. I learned this a long time ago.
Yes, but Shifra Hendre.
Yeah, I'm totally into using divine over God.
I just want to respond to what Shifra Hendre is saying.
Right.
What is happening with all of those words that have slipped into the collective lexicon is that they are all categories. So planet is speaking about, well, there's many planets around the sun.
I hear what you're saying.
And as opposed to the earth, which is our home. A human is a category, mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. So it's very generic. And as someone who spent 4 years studying linguistics, I understand those things don't happen by mistake, ever. You know, even let's say people saying, hey, you know, when I grew up, hey was someone's walking into the street and a car's going to hit them. Hey, now it's like, hi, how you doing? And it says something about the dignity and the esteem we hold each other in, the way we greet each other. So I'm just saying that
it's less personal. It's less personal. It's much less. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, God is personal. It's like some of us do prefer to say divine because
God watches the people on earth as opposed to the divine.
I hear what you're saying.
I appreciate the nuance. I'm troubled by like the division between the divine and God, because part of that for me is just an interpretation. When I educate a lot of people, I either use the divine rather than God, or I quickly teach them the word Hashem and then use neither.
Yeah, Simon also doesn't tend to use the word God.
And I say that the divine is better than God and Hashem is better than both, because I think God is a completely broken word and a completely concept. And for me, the essence of education is
but I'll tell you, Rabbi Katz, I'm sorry to push back, because I myself
push away, right?
I myself stay away from that word for many reasons, because of the associations, and language is so driven by associations. Yet when people are shocked, they don't say, oh, divine. They say, oh, God help me. They do.
I'm not sure what that proves, but it's possibly true. But
what I'm saying is that in those personal moments where the gap that they desperately need filled.
What do they say in other languages?
Evident. Well, whatever it is, I mean, it would be the equivalent of God. I'm not saying that we have to use it. I'm just saying my point was, if we want to create a wave of redemption, it is important to ground things in specifics and not just leave them in general framings.
Yeah, I think we could all agree that words can be loaded, and it's important on the teacher. The role of the teacher or the communicator is to make sure that people understand what you're saying, because I could say God and you mean something else, and 5 different people have different meanings of it. So right. I think we all agree that it's not the word per se, but it's about explaining what you mean by that word.
Right.
Your point is,
only Torah, only Lashon HaKodesh has an absolute, substance, and other words need to be loaded or refined or changed. Do we have time? I want to jump back to another point before, unless we don't have time, Shifra, then I'm happy to drop it.
We used to have more time before.
Before we took time.
Yeah.
That's usually how time works.
Yeah. You can make another point. Let me put a few questions on the table, and then we can, work around them. Okay. So just a few questions that people have asked that I think are personal and universal. One of them is, what's the role of the non-Jew? Is the non-Jew different? Is the non-Jew soul different? I think the reason maybe the reason that's being asked is because different teachers had different things to say about this previously in the summit. So I think it's really important. What is the tikkun of the non-Jew? How is the non-Jew involved? Hasn't Shimona disappeared? Come back, Shimona. And another one is, why do we need Mashiach? What's the role of Mashiach in this whole GEULA process? That's a deep question, and we either will or won't speak to it, depending on where you guys want to go. And the other question that seems to be a theme here is, what is the, beyond the understanding of things, beyond the consciousness level, what are the personal things that we can do to experience redemption, and also to do a tikkun? I'm using the word of one person who asked, do a tikkun in our own particular soul. So those questions on the table now, feel free to say whatever you were going to say, and then we can move into that.
I mean, you got us. Do you want me to go backwards? Do you want me to go forwards?
Go, it's all forward. Go wherever you feel like going.
So again, unless Rabbi Simon's in the house, Shimona is transcended the physical world, is no longer visible, but the neshama is deeply present with us. There's a point that I wanted to pick on that was a little backwards, but I believe it's forward. The summary of the point that we all just discussed when we started about talking about drugs, but then we kind of shifted into the relevant underbelly of that subject, which is really, are we ultimately chasing the high transcendent experience of spirituality, or are we ultimately chasing the simple holy act and meaning and value in an integrated way? And the transcending of transcendence that was discussed. I wanted just to throw a spoke in the wheels. Again, apparently I'm now the spokesman taking that claim again back. But for me, speaking extremely authentically, and as everyone was talking, I had a minor panic attack, and I realized there's a kind of a truth of how I see the world as a Jew and as an educator. And it's more and more what I feel I want to express and the point I want to speak to. And sitting before this wonderful panel who have all been doing this much better and for many more decades than me, I feel like, I shouldn't say what I'm going to say now, but then I feel let's have, Shimona started this with a discussion about authenticity. So I feel like I'm going to just be authentic and say a concern. Going through a tshuva process when I was in my 20s, when I was 23, 24, now I'm 25. It was a very intense year. For me, the last few years, I started with very profound spiritual experiences. Then I was blessed to come to Jerusalem and learn in many different yeshivas and appreciate the depth of halacha and the depth of Talmud and the depth of using my mind and understanding the philosophies. And I taught, Chassidus in a hopefully deep way intellectually for over a decade as well. I'm troubled by the line that we teach and that we're fast to say. And that doesn't mean I don't think this is true, but I wonder whether, here's my challenge, whether in the times before Mashiach, whether this line will change, whether this philosophy will shift. And it's a line that I just heard these two wonderful educators say, and I know that I say this as well, so I can't say I disagree with it, but I'm starting to get restless with this line. And I can tell you honestly, there are times when I was burnt out in yeshiva, and I know hundreds of people who burned out in yeshiva. And this is a line we all say, which is, we know what it's like, that drugs and the high is not ground, it's not integrated, doesn't have wisdom. We haven't sweated for it, as Shimona is saying. It's still selfish. But I still don't know the simple act, as Rabbi Simon was saying, I still can't make my wife happy and take responsibility in my marriage. I still can't have the consistency of a daily job of doing the grind in life because I want the high. And the meditation experience the same. So let us come and let us build on the ground and let's get the wisdom and then let's slowly build that. But there's another voice that says, and I can challenge what I'm going to say, but I want to push it out there, that you can learn the Gemara of your life, you can follow the halachas of your life, you can follow the chumas of your life, and there's many people that scream. And I felt this honestly, authentically in my life, but the higher connection doesn't come. The higher connection that the Baal Shem Tov is talking about, that the Chabad Tzaddik and the Rabbi Nachman is talking about, that the Mor Einayim is talking about, that a person, that idea of doing a simple, meaningful act with that you've sweated over, that is caring for another, that's selfless, of course is holy of holies. Or I want to say, of course, is holy, but I don't know if it's the holy of holies. I felt from my years of learning and my own life experience, whatever value they have or do not have, that is a gullus dika philosophy. That the idea that the simple, meaningful act, even if you don't have the spiritual high, is the ultimate value, I believe is obviously true. And it's better than the ego, drug-induced spiritual high, of course. But my understanding of GEULA is the essence of Torah mitzvahs, and this is surely what the Baal Shem Tov and the Nistarim from which he came from and all the tzaddikim which he trained, they were actually into something different. Even though they spoke about the simple acts of the potato farmers, the simple acts of the Facebook surfers, right? The simple acts of the neshamas of Asiya and their meaning. I don't believe that is the thing that so many people are drawn to in Chassidus. I think the resurgence of is the idea that spirituality is a reality, and spirituality is something that we've accessed. And many Baal Teshuvas on their journey, what jump starts them into their Torah and mitzvahs journey, and what jump starts them often their Hasidic journey, and why many powerful spiritual seekers are always drawn to Hasidus, is because it's speaking to the experience and the spiritual potency of the experience. And if you stop there and you don't integrate and you don't sweat and you don't appreciate the little moments of integrity and the hard work necessary to develop them, then obviously you've done nothing. But I do not, here's my brave line, which I literally feel afraid to say out loud in front of such esteemed educators. I don't think we could afford to say that much longer.
By the way, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Just to say that.
Second, hold on a second. Can I weigh in a minute? And
way away, if that's English.
No, I would say the following. First of all, I'm not sure who you're reacting to, because it's not what I said. I can't speak for Shimona.
I don't think we're disagreeing. I'm just pushing that forward to see.
No, but let me put it to you this way. The answer is very straightforward and very simple. A good Jewish education from day one of a child, literally day one, when they're born, just like they studied in their mother's womb, is a complete integrated Torah. The body of Torah and the soul of Torah. One without the other is a body without a soul, which means the mechanics of Judaism and its laws. Without the soul is a corpse. And a soul without a body is not grounded. If every child was taught that in every yeshiva, we would have, what can I say? Most of our problems would probably disappear. I can't say all, but that's number one. Now, what do you do in a system? And I totally agree, much of the yeshiva system, even Hasidic schools, where the focus is on the mechanics. And even when they teach spirituality, by the way, it's on the mechanics of spirituality. Like someone told me, yes, I learned in yeshiva, I learned Lamed Tes Malachas and Esses Spheres. You understand? So it's all like now one big mathematical equation. So 1,000,000,000% Judaism was always soul and body, always Pneumius and Nigla. There was a time in history, perhaps, where you picked up in the integrity of the smell of the chicken soup in your grandmother's kitchen, and it didn't have to be taught in yeshiva directly. But today, that's not the case. So we're all agreeing. I want to make this stated very, very clear that an integrated thing. And yes, even though Maiso Iker, the action is paramount, and Kabbalah Sol and Nasav and Nishma and all that, absolutely. A Judaism that doesn't have vitality, does not have chayas and being dynamic, some people can get away with that. But how many can? And even those that can get away, how much more enriching their lives would be if Judaism was alive.
100%.
I always ask people, even from Jews, tell me the 3 things you're most passionate about. No one says Judaism. Judaism I do out of obligation. Passion? I love to surf. I love music. I love this thing. Some things are not so kosher, whatever it is. So let's make it clear that today you have to have, there's no way. First of all, the best defense is offense. And if we don't have a passionate Jew, we're in big trouble. And now, as far as secular Jews, for sure, you're going to teach them mechanics without teaching them the soul. So I just want to make it clear that we're on the same page. At the end of things, what you want to qualify and know is that if you're the teacher, look, I've dealt with people who told me clearly, I believe in God today, and I put on tefillin today because I took LSD. It wasn't because I went to yeshiva, I actually left yeshiva. It was because I had an enlightening psychedelic experience. So my response to that is always, hey, you know what? After the fact, great. Now, you wouldn't give a healthy person any dose of medication if they're in a coma. You're in a spiritual coma, and God in some way saved you that way. Fine. So the question now is, what direction you want to guide people? And I would say you want to guide them. I have friends who left the entire system, the yeshiva system, and they are busy with psychedelics. I forgot the pronunciation. You mentioned
ayahuasca.
Yeah, ayahuasca, exactly. And I'm saying, and I speak to them, they're good friends of mine, and I say, so how's your life going? I don't have parnasa, I don't have living. I said, what about marriage? Nah, just running around. And I said, so where's all this enlightenment taking you? And it's not because I'm challenging enlightenment. I'm the last person. I myself, I'm a spiritual oriented person. I don't think without spirituality, I wouldn't have been committed to be very frankly honest. I know it, and I know the risks. And I see that they're not selfish. They're very fine people, but they're lost. And the drugs really, at the end of the day, is escapism for them. They're running into the clouds, into heaven, going up on Mount Sinai.
And I would just like to, Simon.
Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that so I'm totally with you that the traditional language of the fears, I wanted to communicate that, make sure that we're
beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Shimona, what were you going to add?
I wanted to add that in the educational framework that I grew up in, and also having come through Eastern mysticism, there was a sense that the spiritual is superior to the physical. One of the things that I loved when I encountered the Hasidic teachings that I did is that there was the third point of godliness that transcended physical and spiritual. But specifically apropos what you were talking about, that the value of the small deed isn't enough to get us by anymore, like, hush, hush, but yeah, there's something to that. I think it goes together with the idea that intention, there's deeds and there's intention. And the Tanya speaks about the fact that the intention is like the wings of a bird that lifts it on high. But the intention in and of itself is not better than the deed. The only thing that makes it valuable is that God wants it. If he didn't want our love and our inspiration, so then we would just be a bird without wings and we'd walk on the ground like a dodo, and that would be perfectly fine. A dodo would be the perfect offering because you would never need to fly. But God said, actually, I want all of you. I want a relationship, not just with your body, but with your heart and with your soul. So please, open your heart and spread your wings and give me your love and give me your reverence. And that's what makes it valuable. Not that there's anything inherently more valuable in intention and these lofty emotions than there is over something physical. And the other thing I wanted to add, just kind of like...
Well said. Thank you, Shimona. Well said.
Thank you. Something that you said, Simon, just sparked a thought. I don't even remember the original words. Did I put, you said something about it used to be enough for us to pick up truth from the chicken soup, which reminded me of an interesting story that just tangentially, that told us Yankov, who was an opponent originally, for those who are listening in and don't know, a very great person and a mystic. He was originally opposed to the Baal Shem Tov, and then he became one of his followers. He used to make an annual pilgrimage to the Baal Shem Tov, and eventually his wife used to go with him, and then she would study with the Baal Shem Tov's wife, and he used to study with the Baal Shem Tov. And when they came back one year, she would gather with the women and teach them, and she said to them, I learned this year at the Baal Shem Tov what the intention of the high priest was when he offered when they prepared and offered the incense of Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies, and that corresponds to the kugel you make on Shabbat. And she taught them what the intention was, etc. I was fascinated by that story, just in terms of, tradition holds things. And a Baba Maisa, which is a story you heard from your grandmother, they're not such simple things.
They themselves have the power within the infinite power, the divine connection.
About the Baba Maisas. So what I wanted to say, because, Simon was saying, well, we used to be able to pick up truth from the chicken soup and we can't do it anymore. And I think that part of the reason that there's been like a lag, it almost felt to me like, you know, we were about to take off, like this plane was, we were almost airborne, and then something happened. And I think that part of what happened was the internet, in a sociological way, taking our children. And I think that education, I mean, I'm all for education, and the Rebbe spoke extensively about it. I keep coming back to that. Look, these are the texts that I'm currently and ongoingly more familiar with, but he spoke about the need for women to learn Chassidut and Talmud, etc., and what had happened, you know, that when you're bitten by the snake, that something happens. There's a shift in consciousness. Nichnas bahen armumias. Cunningness enters in, and the only rectification for the cunningness, the sophistication, this worldly sophistication, is real sophisticated Torah, the nachash of Torah, that snake, the wisdom of Torah rectifies the false wisdom. And I feel that in the world today, you know, that somehow that plane didn't get airborne. And when I look at what's happening in America, there's the internet, and there's also the way schools are educating children. So, Rabbi Katz, I don't know, are you in England or are you in Australia?
Jerusalem. It's a kind
in Jerusalem, you're in the holy city.
It's west.
Okay.
Have you heard of it? It's west of America.
The center of the world. But let me say this. I see in America, certainly, and it's less that in Australia and in South Africa. The government has taken over the education of children, and moms are all too pleased to allow that to happen. Daycare centers are like the kibbutz system, and you just take your kids. I was driving in Brooklyn the other day, and I saw a sign above a daycare center, 24/7. Care available. I mean, that's basically like, you don't have to go through foster care. You don't have to give your kid up for adoption. You drop them off, pick them up when you want a little fix of that kid, and then take them back because you're pursuing your drug, and your shot in the arm is a bigger income and more prestige because you're on a wagon that says what is valued is labor, work. And I'm horrified by it. And I feel that there has to be a return to the home, to the wisdom that is picked up in the chicken soup. And I can tell you, my niece recently had a little baby, and my sister sent me a picture that my niece had taken of my sister, showing my niece how to bathe the baby. She was wrapped in it. And I remember my mother teaching me that. And I have a blanket that my grandmother crocheted for me when my mother was pregnant. And, you know, these things are precious. It's like, what am I going to give to my daughter and to my children? I don't want to hear what the government has to say. Stay away. You don't stand for what I do. I don't care. I'm not talking about liberal, Democrat, left, right, irrelevant. I have a Bobby, and she had a Bobby, and we have something to give to our children. And if we get quiet for long enough, turn off our phones, open up the books, open up our hearts, I am sure that we can find that, and that we can give it to our children. They need it so desperately. I sit with my clients, and I just feel like the mothers are in the house, but they're not at home. It's like no one's home. Let's just shut it down. I mean, as you said, Rabbi Katz, there's such wonderful things that happen through the internet. But if I'm not mastering it, it's owning me, you know, and I've just got my ear bolted to the door. Anyway, so that Simon said something about picking things up from the chicken soup. So it reminded me.
Only a mother in Israel could speak the way you just spoke. We men just don't get it.
I think you do, Simon.
Let me make a semicolon level pause right here, because the time is getting short. it of course went much faster than any of us anticipated, but it always does. So we should anticipate it. I want to make sure I want to say something, and I also want to make sure that we at least deal with the most practical of questions before we hang up. We're obviously not going to get to most of the questions again. But you
mentioned 3 questions, Shifra. We can handle those 3.
Okay. The person who was on the phone hung up, but that was, I guess they give up after an hour. So
an hour?
People are fascinated by the conversation. I'm fascinated by the conversation. Before we go any further, I just want to point out that the people who are on this panel, the people who are on the summit, and many other people who speak, teach, learn, work in this arena are doing so because they're passionate about something that they feel is a missing piece, or something that they feel is the most important of transmissions, something that they feel is a cosmic path to truth and to redemption. So the fact that, and it's just so illustrative of the way the Torah is, this is true and this is true and it's godly. So I'm encouraging, and most of the listeners probably already know this, but I'm encouraging everybody to understand that this is not an argument, but rather a gazing and a discussion on something that's much bigger than any of us. And clearly we are, part of GEULA is that we are in a new era. And the emphasis on the physical, and I feel I should mention this, the Rebbe himself said in 1992, I think it was 1992 in Parshat Vayishlach, that all of the sparks that needed to be elevated for Mashiach to come have been elevated. And there is also an additional service that the Rebbe referred to as Yichud Yichudim, and in other ways as well, that there is a new demand for consciousness, and consciousness only because God, I have to say this from my own passion, it's not only because God prefers this or that. I mean, ultimately that's everything about creation is because God prefers it, but we are on a journey to a destiny, and the destiny is that we will see God eye to eye. We will be intimate with God. That's the purpose for creation. So wherever we are on the path, and whichever course corrections need to be made on that path, and wherever the balance currently is between the physical and the spiritual, or the personal and the cosmic, or the language that we use, we need, in my opinion, this is where I'm coming from with my, this is what inspires me and what drives me, that we need to get to the destination. It's not 100% in our control, but as Pirkei Avos so famously says, we're not free to desist from it, and each of us in our own way learning from others. This is an example of GEULA, where people with passion and people who are learned and people who maybe feel that the important things are not being addressed in so many ways can get together and can air different perspectives for the greater good and for a greater understanding of the whole. So I just wanted to put that on the table. I'm hearing that it's not too difficult to understand. Okay, and then I just feel I put 3 questions on the table. We don't have a lot of time, but Claudia, who has been I just know her name is Claudia, has been asking, and I'm not really sure I understand the question, but it feels really important. She's saying, does anyone actually have a real concrete plan? Imagine Mashiach shows up for a Shabbat lunch. My soul is amazed and joyful listening to all these lofty discussions. At the same time, I don't know that the world, especially the non-Jewish world, is ever going to be ready for Mashiach.
I think we just decided that we should eat more chicken soup. I think that was pretty unanimous after all of that.
Well, that's an important piece. There's no question about it. But what is, I don't even understand the question exactly, what is the plan, but this is sort of general question number 3. What is it that people can do, need to do? We have brought some of those things to the table, but in a very concrete and personal way, speaking to people who are Jewish and people who are not Jewish. And if you can address the other questions at the same time, that would be awesome. But let's at very least try to let people walk away feeling not just inspired and not just expanded, which I'm sure people do, but also directed.
Maybe we should all do 30 seconds each on that. Can we handle the challenge?
30, 60?
I have 30 seconds to say on that if you like.
Go.
I'd love to hear.
I would focus on 2 things for every one of us. You ask somebody, who are you? Most people answer by giving you their business card. That's not who you are. That's what you do. And what you do shouldn't define who you are. Who you are should define what you do. So simply put, I would make a recommendation, which I always do. Every morning when you wake up, think or say about that one powerful prayer, Moda Ani, acknowledging that you have a soul within you. It's just been refreshed. Your mission has been renewed for a new day. And how are you going to express your soul today? Which can be through a kind word, through a nice gesture, through just being maybe a little more refined. That's one thing I would suggest every morning and every evening before going to sleep. Instead of falling asleep with a newspaper on your nose or with a television on or with your cell phone, to think about the same idea that you are returning your soul to God, the divine, whatever word you want to use, and that soul is the center of your life, not body. And the second thing I was going to recommend, that's more of a prayer or meditation type of idea. And the second is an action-based. The second thing is to commit, if you haven't done so, and even if you have, to study something on a weekly basis, maybe with a partner, maybe with a class, with a group, maybe online, but a commitment. I don't mean sporadic. Commitment, certain time, once a week at least, to study something soulful and spiritual. Talk about your own soul, the x-ray of your soul, if you wish. What makes you tick and what defines who you are. You know, we're so immersed in the material world. That is a way of countering that and starting to perhaps think through the lens of your soul instead of through the lens of your body, through the lens of who you are instead of the lens of what you do. Maybe that was more than 30 seconds, but that's my short suggestion.
More than 30 seconds is good.
Beautiful. I'll play. You know, the ultimate goal to bring Mashiach is the idea of tikkun olam. We're supposed to fix the world. And, you know, there's a lot of, it's a very kind of used and abused term today. Everyone's doing tikkun olam. They're planting trees. They're marching down the street for some particular cause. Everything's tikkun olam. But what is tikkun olam in essence? Tikkun means to fix, to heal, to align. Olam usually means the world. But we know that the word olam comes the word ne'elem, which means hidden. And really tikkun olam means that we live in an environment of tzimtzum, where there's a fundamental lacking. We don't say, you know, if there's God, why does the world look like a mess that it does? We say the definition of the world is a place where the world itself actually means hidden. It's the place of hiddenness of divinity. And our goal is to reveal divinity in morals and values and ethics and wholly integrated actions. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to fix the hiddenness, fix the concealment by revealing through our thoughts, through our feelings, through our actions, divinity into the world. But we also know that our sages teach us, just like there's an olam gadol, like there's a big world, a big universe. There's also an olam katan, a small universe. That every single one of us is a small universe. According to the Midrash, we'll have a sun, a moon, we have Jews, we have nations, we have everything within us. And therefore, if we are called a small world, then by the same twist of the words, we're also called a small hiddenness. That every single one of us has a part of divinity which is not fully revealed. And it's not fully shining. We are not fully illuminated. And the goal of learning Torah and the goal of doing mitzvahs is that we understand our potential light and we reveal that. And doubling back to something Shimona said beautifully before, this idea that our actions have to have wings. And as the Tanya says, quoting other sources, the wings are love and fear. And I think that's one of the takeaways I've had from this beautiful discussion, that what we have to transition, what I'm seeing is as a Torah of Galus, which is when the small action is enough, even if we don't feel that. And that's necessary when we're in a time of katnus, I can't connect. But when we're returning to a time of redemption, I believe that Hashem wants the full sfiras. He wants the beautiful, meaningful action, but he also wants the love and fear. He also wants the chayas. He also wants the light. He wants that full package. That is a geula action. So the ultimate act of tikkun olam, the ultimate act is to heal and fix and realign ourselves, that we shouldn't be walking hiddennesses, but walking revelations. So my suggestion would be that every day we should do one mitzvah, whatever that is for you, big or small. But you should do it as a geuladik yid, as a holistically integrated person.
Not yid, or non-yid.
Right. Whoa. As a whole integrated person. I think person was good for Shimona, not a human, but definitely a person. And the idea is that not just to do an action of value, of depth, that Torah guides us, but do it with full love and full awe and full mindfulness and full divine connection. Have incredible intent to heal yourself and bring light to your own darkness and heal the world, bring light to your own darkness. Give for 1 or 2 minutes your whole heart and soul and being And I believe at that moment you step out of a goalless and exile mentality. You redeem your own inner world. You take away your own hiddenness, and you're holistic, because all your koiches, all your energies are aligned into a simple act. And I believe at that moment you become a complete channel for redemption. And hold in mind that so too in my small hiddenness, so too that should be for the world. So too I should have redemption through this act. So too should the whole world. Rav Nachman says that highest part of our soul is the soul is connected to the soul of Mashiach. We all have a small part of Mashiach within us. And he says when we can reveal that light through our actions into the world, then we cause the ultimate Mashiach to be revealed in the world as well. So that's our little act of tikkun olam, of fixing our own hiddenness to fix the big hiddenness in the world.
Thank you. Shimona?
Also, I also failed 30 seconds.
Good. 30 seconds was not realistic.
Okay.
Also, anybody who wants to speak, if we can go quickly like this, we can speak to the other questions as well. Shimona, how would you advise people to really bring it down?
Yeah, part of what I was saying earlier about bringing things into the home, I think that we have, there's a tipping point that either is happening or will happen of bringing things into a personal sphere. I know friends think that they're there for each other, but aren't really, because it's virtual and it's by text. There's something very different that happens when you meet people. I think that try and meet people, someone once a week, be with them energetically, and be with your children, with the members of, if you have children, or the people that you live with, so that we're present to them. And however much time you spend, I would say radically cut down time on social media, which it may not be exactly what we want to say on a social media event, but I do think that is very beneficial. And then in Ethics of Our Fathers, we're taught that the world stands on three things: the study of Torah and prayer and good deeds. And, I'm thinking, as you said, whether a person's Jewish or not, there's 7 laws, the 7 colors of the rainbow correspond to 7 universal principles for all mankind. And learn about that. What is God's map? What's the blueprint? What's his vision for reality? And take some time every day to pray, whether it is from a liturgical text or in your own words, but better if it's both. Talk to God and be involved in acts of kindness on a daily basis. And I think that the act of kindness, doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be very dramatic, and it could be hidden, just giving to someone where it's a little bit beyond our comfort zone, or even if it's not, just making sure that it's consistent. And, someone apologized to me once, and I said to her, thank you. She was shocked. She didn't expect that. She expected me to say no problem. But when I said thank you, she kind of went off the rails. Be there when you do it. Sorry, thank you, whatever it is. Kind of be open enough to risk being fully present.
So I guess I want to say, if I'm going to put it in a nutshell, number 1, don't assume you know what's possible, because more is possible than we believe is, and it's a work in progress. I feel like we're on the edge of cosmic exploration, and that, and since we're all quoting the Rebbe, that's my source as well. That there are many things that are available in the world in terms of our own personal growth, the revelation of self, our relationship with Hashem, our ability to transcend our limitations, and even our ability to change the nature of reality that we're not aware of. And the only way we can be aware of them, or at least the first step to being aware of them and stepping into them, is to not believe in the limitations of the past, whether it's in terms of what we can achieve personally, experience personally, or can, excuse the New Age language, but co-create, bring into revealed manifestation in the world, whether it's in our own personal lives, our homes, our bodies, our relationships, or whether it's the world at large. And the other thing I want to say is, it seems to me, and it's very clear to me that there are two aspects to really, really transforming our own consciousness and our own way of being. One of them is to connect to Hasidus, to the deep learning of Torah, which is divine consciousness, God consciousness, God's wisdom. There's no way around it. It's infinite. God is in it, and to whatever degree we can connect to it and absorb and integrate it, that is the degree to which our minds will automatically be different, be expanded. And then we run up against, we're made of a divine soul, an animal soul, a body, an ego, all kinds of components. And I think we have to embrace our whole selves with compassion, if not with love, which doesn't mean accepting everything as an ongoing state of being. That's accepting limitations. That's not believing things are possible. But I think that the prelude to really stepping out of limitations, or even better, turning darkness to light, like Rav Doniel said, which is the fundamental reason why we're here in many ways. I think that the prelude to that is to be able to see, and this is what you said in the beginning, Shimona, I think we're coming full circle around, to be able to see with love and compassion our humanness, our personness, our limitations, the things that we think are our own secret, shameful flaws. Shame is one of the biggest blocks to redemption that could exist, if not the biggest. And so if we can understand that everything about us is part of the picture, that our own inner darkness is really a potential vessel for huge light. So learning divine consciousness through the Torah, and then being willing to see ourselves with love and compassion, and do that inner transformation work at the root of all of the things that have us triggered and have us limited. I think that the combination of those things, obviously within a context of prayer and connecting to God, is the winning formula. At least that's how I see it. I went way over a minute too, 30 seconds. Okay,
I think we should just try that again. Can we try it again and kind of get it down to 30 seconds? No one's going anywhere till we get this right.
Do we want to do another round robin about Jews, non-Jews, or about the need for Mashiach? Or somebody asked why Moshe.
Is there a limit to our conversation here?
Well, the truth is, to be very, very authentic here, I got a request from your office to keep it to 2.5 hours, which we have just exceeded. So I was originally going to go for 3.
If you didn't have the request, how long would it be?
3 hours. I mean, we can just keep going till we want to stop, and maybe one more round, maybe 2 more rounds, if everybody's comfortable.
I'll just tell you, my life experience is at 3 hours. People staying around for 3 hours. Kala kavod, if you could keep them.
Yeah, well, the numbers have dwindled a little bit, but we still have, between Facebook and the Instant Teleseminar, we still have a couple people on live.
I'm just for the record, since we're already on the record, short is always long.
Okay, do you want to stop? Is that what the vote? Let's go.
I'm only one person here. There's others here. So whatever, everybody. I'll go with the consensus.
I'm here till the GEULA comes. Let's do it. It's not going to make it happen, and who will?
All right, let's go a little longer, just because we said that we would answer questions. People are saying, keep going, let other people leave if they want to. Please keep going. And GEULA, there's no time. The panel needs to go all day. Okay, so that's the vote of the audience. Let's talk about non-Jews, because not everybody here was at every call like I was, but I think that there was some confusion left on the table. We can do another round robin. Like, what is the role of the non-Jews? How can a non-Jew reach the highest heights? We talked about the 7 mitzvahs, the 7 colors of the rainbow, but is there more? I know that I heard from.
Let me begin. Let's keep it grounded. This isn't speculation or personal feelings or partisanships, or just as we know that the GEULA will come from God and the Torah. God tells us what the GEULA will look like, and God tells us what the universe will look like. So when you look at all the prophecies in the book of Isaiah and other books, and all distilled by the Rambam, Maimonides, in the end of the Laws of Kings, which is in his classic magnum opus, Mishnah Torah, makes it very clear that God created every human being on this earth, 7.5 billion and counting, or is it 8 billion already? Every human being created in the divine image, and God doesn't create anything for no purpose. Every human being has a spiritual destiny and a spiritual mission and role to play. And the words of Maimonides, he says, the entire that when Mashiach comes, I'm quoting now from chapter 12, the last chapter of the magnum opus of the book of Halacha. This isn't philosophy. This isn't an opinion. It's law, Torah law. As I said, distilled from all the sources, that in the end of time, Mashiach coming, the world will have no more war, no more hunger, no more battles and jealousies and unhealthy competition. The world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. And he says clearly, the entire business of the world, and he means the entire world, because then he makes it clear about the Jews who will have a particular role as their teachers and as educators and so on. The entire world will be busy with nothing but knowing God, meaning not with materialism as an end in itself, but with spirituality. This is the words of Isaiah. The world will be no longer destruction, no longer evil, because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. World peace is not possible without the entire world participating, obviously. So spiritual awareness, higher consciousness is for every human being on this planet, and that's that. Now, does that in any way compromise the distinction between Jews and non-Jews? Absolutely not. The distinction of Jews and non-Jews has never meant to belittle or in any way minimize the role of non-Jews. Jews have a particular role, which I don't think is the scope for this discussion. If the other, my co-panelists want to take that on, by all means, I think it's a whole other discussion. But for the record, for I think our discussion here, anything said here, anything taught is really universal in that sense. But, you know, like in any type of system, just like within among Jews itself, you have Kohanim, Levites, Israelites, you have men and women, you have men, women, and children. You have all of us here. We have different persuasions, different ways of looking at things. So there are particular roles that people play. But as far as the general spiritual destiny, and as far as all of us participating in coming to a higher state of consciousness to achieve GEULA, that is absolutely universal.
That is the image for GEULA. If we read the prayer books of Rosh Hashanah, you know, what we see, the image of GEULA is that, you know, it's not just something we're practicing or keeping to ourselves. It's when the teachings, the ultimate spiritual wisdom goes global. And that means it goes out of our head and into our heart, into our body on a personal level. That means it goes, as Rabbi Simon was saying, we are Memeleches Kohanim. Again, that's a Torah source. That means we are the priests to the world. We are the teachers and educators. Torah is a universal wisdom at its core. We are supposed to be an all goyim. We're supposed to be a light. Again, goy, just to say the obvious, is not a, God forbid, a derogatory term. It just means nations, and we are called a nation. We're called goy by God. So the idea is that we are the teachers. We have received a gift. We are supposed to shine that light into the world. I think we get a lot of pushback when we don't think globally. We don't share that wisdom because we need a push to keep sharing that. And our sages say from the time of the Gemara, they say that just as we can have Ruach HaKodesh, non-Jews, slaves, it says everybody in the world has the ability, man and woman, to have Ruach HaKodesh. Even the Balatanya, who sometimes get a bad rap in this area, in the city, he said non-Jews can have Kirvus Elokim. They can have spiritual access. As we're all saying, it's on the table for every human being. The Jews were given a gift that they were supposed to be the ones that received this from above and transmitted this to the world. These levels of consciousness, the mitzvahs, there's not just 7 mitzvahs, there's the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach are actually much more extensive and have a lot of complexity and details. There's enough to keep us all busy, and this is obligation for every human being. I think it's like ourselves feel, you know, behooved. It's one of those religious words to say, but you know, that we feel that this is an opportunity in the world that is not being fully tapped. You know, the Rebbe for sure picked that up. And people come from around the world with this desire for connection, which is, I think, perhaps unprecedented in history. And this is part of the GEULA of awakening within souls around the world, non-Jews. And our goal, I think, our responsibility as Jews, as teachers, is to ramp up the teachings and begin to take them wider and deeper and show everyone their power and light and give them access never before. And I believe that is a deep part of the mechanisms of GEULA redemption.
Well said. Thank you. Shimona?
I think it's significant that in Judaism, there's no expectation of conversion. You know, there clearly is, even at a legal level, the understanding that the way to bring the redemption is for each person to be who they are and for each nation to be who they are. There's no idea of going out and getting the nations of the world to become Jews. That is not the goal at all. It's like you be you and you be you and I'll be me. Each one has to be who they are. The other thing that I think is significant is that when I look at the body of work of my personal teacher, the Rebbe, I am struck by the fact that in the 80s, he spoke about reaching out to the nations of the world. And then in the 90s, he spoke about the coming of Mashiach. And, I think that everything the Rebbe did was very forethought. There was an enormous amount of forethought and depth, and that he understood that it is impossible to bring Mashiach and to begin to speak about this ultimate revelation where there's the manifestation of who we are, of our full potential. I think that the Rebbe understood that is not a conversation that can happen in a productive way until you have first spent a decade pretty much on talking about the nations of the world and their role in God's vision for reality and humanity. And I say that in the very large sense of all the people that make up humanity. And the last thing I want to say is that for any people who aren't Jewish on the call, there is this wonderful, let's say, matrix of understanding of life and purpose. In my program, The Method, I always speak referencing something Simon said. We focus a lot on our existence, which is how we are and where we are and what we are, but our identity and our purpose, who we are and why we're here, those are the bookends of our existence. And we have to look at that. And this matrix is basically 7 circles of sanctity. They correspond to the 7 colors of the rainbow, and they address, just as there are 10 commandments that were given at Mount Sinai, there were 7 that were given to Noah for all mankind, and they speak about the sanctity of the soul and of marriage and the family, the sanctity of community, the sanctity of the environment. So there's these 7 circles or spheres of sanctity that every person alive has to immerse themselves in. And if we can tap into that, then we touch that part of us that, like Rabbi Katz was saying, that is hidden. And that's Mashiach.
Beautiful.
And Torah is for everyone, especially the inner part of Torah. It's necessary for the healing of the world.
Not just the inner part of Torah, and Rabbi Bell told me he worked for many years on a code of law of the 7 Noahide laws. And just as the 10 commandments become many, many laws in their details, so too did those 7 become many, many laws.
Right.
And, that's something that the Rebbe was really...
I always point out to people who are dismissive of the 7 laws, I said, if every Jew kept the 7 Noahide laws, we'd have Mashiach.
Right, we'd be doing pretty well.
Okay, here's a strange question. I realize that there's pressure to end, but it's strange to me. I don't know if it'd be strange to you, but somebody's been asking about it a lot today, and also it was brought up in some of the calls throughout the summit. And I don't understand it really myself, but I want to ask it of the panel, and that is about the 10 lost tribes. So I get without, excuse my ignorance, whoever knows more than I do about this, but it seems to me that some teachers are teaching that anyone who has an attraction to Torah and Judaism who's not Jewish is of the 10 lost tribes, and they're making a distinction. I could be making this up, I could be misunderstanding, but it seems that they're making that they're pointing out that there are only 2 and a piece of tribes that are known, and that the Jewish people are not all of the tribes of Israel. So I'm just throwing it out because it's been coming up. And
does anybody want to take it? If not, I'll take it.
You go, Simon.
If you want, Rabbi Katz, you want to take it?
Please, I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Excited, intrigued.
This is the excited. Yeah.
There's a lot of myths and frankly fabrications around this whole concept of the 10 hidden tribes and the 10 lost tribes. So it's important that everything be grounded again in sources. It comes down to this. Jacob had 12 sons, and then unfortunately, and one daughter, Dinah. Unfortunately, they were all united under King David and King Solomon, but then there was a split. You read in the story in the Nach, and I'm literally directly sourced in the Bible, in the Nevi'im, in the books of the kings and so on. There was a split, and a split in the kingdom. One was called the Kingdom of Israel, one was called the Kingdom of Judah. The Kingdom of Judah consisted of two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, and partially of Ephraim. Okay, and the other 10 tribes, which was Reuven, Shimon. Levites don't consider a tribe because they were the servants in the temple, but the rest of the tribes. And they basically had two sets of kings, and they were living in Israel. Remember, Israel was separated by the different sections. The temple was under the control of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, and there were battles over that as well, but let's not go into the details. Then, at the end of the first temple, Sancherib, the king of Assyria, came, and he conquered the kingdom of Israel, which was the kingdom of the 10 tribes. And he dispersed them. And since then, they're called the lost 10 tribes. Other tribes continued to remain, meaning Judah and Benjamin and half of Ephraim, and they were conquered by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar, the destruction of the first temple. And they went to Babylon and later would come back for the second temple. So literally, most Jews today, if not virtually all, are descend from these two tribes, Benjamin and Judah, and Levi. Remember, the Levites were served in the temple. They were part of that group. So today, everybody originates from them. What happened to the 10 tribes is the big question. After Assyria dispersed them, some say they got lost and will not be returned until Mashiach comes. Some say that they are different pockets of them in different countries. And that's why you find even in China or Mexico and India, certain tribes that have certain Jewish customs. But from all consensus, this is very vital, because they essentially lost their connection to the rabbinic, to the rabbis. Many of them lost touch with really the performance of mitzvahs according to Torah. They lost that's exactly what Assyria wanted, what Sancherib wanted to accomplish. He wanted them to assimilate. So most of them are assimilated. Now, of course, people debate about the Ethiopians and others, but suffice it to say, it's not a simple matter. It's complicated. And no one can just come up and say, hey, I found one of the 10 tribes. It doesn't work that way. In Judaism, there's a rigorous process of establishing Jewish heritage and Jewish lineage, and with the laws kept, because there's a lot of issues, marriage laws and other laws that if they're not kept up, no matter who we are, can cause a lot of problems. So that's a general picture with different opinions of it. Doesn't matter.
Simon, I would just like to add on this line as you were speaking, when you speak, I think I may have mentioned on another call, I was studying in a seminary and a friend of mine was a convert, but at her wedding, her grandmother gave her a gift from her own grandmother, which was a wedding document, and they were 5 generations of women. She had no idea that she was a Jew. So if there is that line that there are 5 mothers in line, then there is Jewishness. But if you look at something like what happened with Ethiopia, my point is Torah law establishes whether you are Jewish or not. And when you lose the laws of divorce, then if you are not getting divorced according to Torah law, let's say a woman is married and she gets divorced, but she doesn't get a legal divorce. I'm talking about a Jewish legal divorce called a get, and she marries someone else, that is highly problematic. And that is one of the reasons why one of the solutions that was offered with Ethiopian immigration is let everyone convert, because if you convert, then you remove that entire problem of how does the continuation of the people happen.
Right. It was not about not
that.
accepting them. It was about simply a practical solution. Correct.
Yes, this was a practical solution to the problem of illegitimacy that would have arisen out of inappropriate divorces. And in an attempt to be kind, there was an unkindness done to people. So I know that we're short on time. I guess
this is very, very important
to say is that I think that this is such a beautiful point to end on, because there is a legal point. And if you take out the tree of life if you take out the tree of knowledge and this legal body that holds the people, as I said, the seven Ochad laws, one of them is established courts. There has to be a legal system in order for any community to survive. And Torah says, according to Torah, is this person Jewish or not Jewish? That is the law. And it is not based on what you heard. It's not based on, like Elizabeth Warren's thing, or apparently AOC now has a fine. You could have, grandfather. If neither of your parents are Jewish, I don't care how many Jewish people there were before, you're not Jewish. And then it's just kind of, virtue signaling. So,
did the Rebbe ever speak to this issue?
Yes.
The Ethiopian issue, yes.
Yeah.
Did he ever speak in a more general sense, this idea that there could be people that come forward that have a direct line and they will be reintegrated as Jews at the times of Mashiach?
He spoke about it. He didn't say anything that was not said earlier, meaning he referred to all the different opinions on the matter, because there is no consensus. There's no halachic master in Shulchan Aruch or Rambam that has a final definitive approach to this. There's just a bunch of opinions. It does say when Mashiach comes, he will clarify yichus, which means lineage. And therefore, some definitely feel that there will be a whole community. But remember, if there's 14.5 million Jews from two tribes, imagine how many there would be. But there's no hidden Jews hiding somewhere behind some river that are just waiting to be redeemed. That's not, no one believes that. The fact that the 10 tribes were lost, that's why they're called lost, is to say that unfortunately, they were lost also to their tradition. And what will happen at the end of the day, something miraculous or not, that's left to be questioned. But I would think most of the people would probably agree. You're not going to suddenly have a billion people suddenly declare Jews. Doesn't seem that anybody feels that way. Maybe there is an opinion.
Very difficult to sustain. I think it's a...
Yeah, we have enough problems with 14.5 million, right?
Just keeping those 14.5 million Jewish has not been that easy. I don't think that... But that doesn't mean that they couldn't... Of course, if there was a man married a non-Jewish woman, the next generation is not Jewish. But if there was a direct line of women, then there might be a question.
But I will say this. I think ideologically, this is definitely enters a very intriguing concept after the fact, obviously. Because look... Sancherib of Assyria, his intention was destruction. It wasn't a positive intention. But at the end of the day, there is a statement in the Talmud that says that Tzedakah asa Kadosh Baruch Hu liyisrael shepizran beina umayis. God did a charity for the Jewish people that he spread them among the nations. And the way especially the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters explain it, because he spread them among the nations to bring God among the nations and to also bring the nations closer to God. So it's a tzedakah after the fact. So you could technically say that the fact that these 10 tribes, their DNA, which comes from Jacob and from Isaac and from Abraham, is somewhere out there, means in many ways it may have helped certain type of global and universal refinement of the nations to be where they are today, which is much more receptive to spiritual ideas, as opposed to an old ancient pagan world that was very hostile to these concepts. So you could argue that, and that ultimately their sparks cannot be lost. Their identities perhaps were lost, not their sparks.
Did you want to add, thank you. Did you want to add anything, Rav Doniel?
I think they've done a very good job. We'll leave it at that.
Me too. I just want to clarify for some of the listeners, in case it isn't completely clear, if you're not familiar with the whole discussion about Torah law, then it might be going over your head, or you might be dismissing it. There are these two aspects, these two core aspects to how Torah has been transmitted and stayed clear and pure and connected to divine truth, a direct transmission of divine truth throughout millennia, and especially millennia where Jews were dispersed and where Torah was suppressed and so forth. One of them is the inner dimension of Torah, and the other one is the Torah law, the Jewish law. And so even if someone, and this is the idea, someone asked how you could convert if you're already Jewish. So if there's a question in the law about whether somebody's Jewish, often the decision is to convert them in case. And it's not just if somebody's in a lost tribe or they can't prove their lineage. If somebody is born from a convert who might not have actually been a convert, then often the solution is to convert them, just to clear up the confusion. In other words, there's a divine truth, a godly truth, and then there's a practical application, which is also part of divine truth. God wants us to follow the law. When we can't determine, yes, at some point Mashiach will, God's the ultimate judge, as people are saying, the ultimate truth. At some point Mashiach will discern lineage. But meanwhile, until that happens, even if we're in the middle of the GEULA process, which I believe we are, I think we all believe we are, we still are obligated, what God has given to us and commanded and asked of us, and it's for our own good, clearly, is to determine the practical lines through the application of Jewish law that has to be implemented by qualified people who have learned it and who can be trusted for that. So I'm saying that for the sake of the audience, obviously that doesn't add anything to the panel, but it's really important to understand that, because without understanding that, and I think that in a sense, that's been our theme the whole time. Like, do we do the practical action, or do we do the spiritual elevation? Is it about our own individual inner truth, or is it about some kind of cosmic overriding what God wants? And the answer is both. Both are true, and both are crucial. But when it comes to the practical, when it comes to your personal growth, go for the spirituality. When it comes to the, changing the world, go for the physicality. And when it comes to making a practical decision that has vast implications in terms of Judaism, Torah, the peoples of the world, the enacting and the manifesting of the divine vision, it has to be through the law. It has to be through halacha. So I hope that clarifies and doesn't confuse. Thank you. This was really so much better than I even expected and wanted and hoped that it would be. It was really wonderful. And I actually haven't been part of a discussion like this before. And I hope that if you also enjoyed it, I hope we can do more. I know the audience loved it, and it's going to spread and make an impact. And I really feel like on a personal note, we're moving from tohu to tikkun. When we can have differing opinions that come together for a greater whole, and questions that make us all think more deeply, and then answers that we each maybe hold a little piece of. It's been very special. So thank you for your initial interviews, for your support and participation, and for your wisdom and time joining us. Rabbi Simon Jacobson says, I second that. Thank you. So final words, anybody? Let's just do one more final words, and then we'll call it a day. This could really be 30
Shift
seconds.
now.
Oh, good. Amen.
Otherwise, we'll have to go another hour.
Great work of using technology. I hope 7.5 billion people are listening to this, potentially for sure. And this should be the act that tips the scales, and we can experience it then instead of just talking about it.
Amen, amen, amen.
And I just like to say a sign of GEULA is the mishpim are getting together, because it's not it's very complex, and that's the nicest thing I can say on the subject. But it's really been a pleasure to listen to you both and hear your own teachings and your own eloquence. I'm sick of hearing my own voice talk about these things, and it's quite beautiful to hear other perspectives and jam together. It's a kind of music of hearing different neshamas weave together different perspectives. I know Shifra had to say a few times the Elu ve'elu line. I didn't really hear much agreement, but I heard the same kind of neshama, expressing things their own lens in a very beautiful way. So that was personally beautiful, and I thank you so much. And chazak, you should go machal al-chai on your own teachings, your own impact, and I hope we get a chance to speak again, either on a personal level, my house, you'll invite it, or online or in person one day, B'ezrat Hashem.
Sounds wonderful.
Feelings are mutual, very beautifully stated, and I feel the same way. It was a great synergy.
Onward and upward. Thanks, everybody. And thanks to the audience. And some of you have been on every single call from beginning to end. Actually, most people are on now have. So really appreciating that. And all the calls are open, including this, until Friday. So please share with your friends. Anybody you didn't think of bringing into the Global GEULA Summit, globalgeulasummit.com. Send them on over.
Don't leave anyone out of the GEULA. Otherwise, it won't be a GEULA. I think that's the summary.
Right. That's right. That's right. We'll keep the lights on for you, as they say. Okay. Take care, everybody. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.